Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Fight Night 216, Cannonier versus Strickland, also known as UFC Vegas 66. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. With me, as always, and for the last time in the year of our Lord 2022, is Keith Shillan, the executive producer of the Sherdog Radio Network. Keith, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm glad you threw out there in 2022 because for a second I thought you were breaking news. I was getting fired. I think you found out the James Krause scandal, all the insider information I've been giving out.
No, the horses are all back in the barn, but for this last batch of them, we had the last pay-per-view of the year, of course, last night, which we just recapped, UFC 282, full of controversy, weirdness, plenty to talk about. This 14-fight card is a pretty representative card for 2022. It has a pretty high-stakes matchup at the top. These are two guys that could have been fighting for the middleweight title had their last appearance in the cage gone differently. Then down the card, it's a pretty mixed bag, including plenty of... Oh, go ahead.
I mean, Cannonier's last fight, wasn't his last fight for the title?
It was for the title, and Strickland's was in a title eliminator on that same night against Alex Pereira. Like, if they had won their last fights, I mean, these guys probably would have been fighting for... Yeah,
this could have been the title fight, yeah.
And then the rest of the way down the card, it's a pretty mixed bag, but got some fighters, changing weights, got some last minute illness / injury, changes to bouts, just very much par for the course for 2022. Looking at this card in advance on paper, what would you grade this for a free fight night?
Oh, I think it's a good one. Some really good matchups. The Cory main event is a fantastic matchup. I'd give it like an A-.
I'm with you there. A-, and I would not be surprised at all if at the end of we won't be recapping this one. We'll talk about that later. But if we were recapping this one, we were saying that this delivered even better than what's on paper, because on top of divisional relevance, it's got some fights that should be bangers on it.
Yeah, no, yeah. Even fights that, like you said, like Deron Winn versus Julian Marquez. Like, that's going to be a banger. It's not neither guy's even close to like a title shot, but it's going to be fun.
It certainly is. Drew Dober versus Bobby Green looks like it's set to open up the main card. That Bobby Green seems to have escaped that. Bobby Green, I don't think, is going to be in very many boring fights from here on out. Let me just put it that way. Like, he's at least turned that corner. I don't want to try to preview all 14 fights during the intro. You want to just dig right into these prelims?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. First fight out of the gate at UFC Vegas 66 is a bantamweight matchup between Sergey Morozov and Journey Newson. Morozov, the 33-year-old from Kazakhstan, is 18-5 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC as a former M1 Global Bantamweight champ. He has alternated wins and losses, fighting a pretty consistently high level of opponents the whole way. He lost to Umar Nurmagomedov in his debut, came back with a win over Khalid Taha, lost again via submission to Douglas Silva de Andrade, and came back most recently with another win, this one a unanimous decision over Raulian Paiva at UFC on ESPN Sarukian versus Gamrot back in June. The good news for Morozov is that he's never been awake for any of his losses, so as far as he knows, he's still undefeated in the UFC. He has to be the first guy in UFC history to have both of his first two losses in the octagon come by technical submission. So yeah, like as far as he knows, he's still undefeated in the octagon. He's going to try to keep it that way against Newson. The 33-year-old Oregonian is 10-3 with one no contest overall. He is 1-2 with one no contest in the UFC. Worth noting that one no contest was a win for him. He smashed Domingo Pilarte in 38 seconds back in February of 2020. That was later overturned due to cannabis. So depending on how you feel about weed as a performance enhancer, quote unquote, he should be 2-2 in the octagon as well. But he won his most recent time out as well. That was back in May at UFC 274, where he took a unanimous decision over Fernie Garcia. Odds on this one, pretty wide. Morozov, a minus 225 favorite. Newson plus 190 on the comeback. I like both these guys, but I do think the line here is pretty indicative of their actual potential. I think Morozov is a potential contender, whereas I think Newson is a potential reliable mid-card action fighter. And bantamweight needs both, so I like this fight. But Morozov, I like what he's shown us so far. I mean, the Achilles heel is obviously there. His losses in the UFC are both by technical submission due to rear naked choke. And but on the offensive side, I mean, he's a diverse striker, blends punches and kicks well, has a good takedown game, not great at keeping top control. He's tends to try to do damage, advance position, look for submissions over just securing the position. He fights like a guy. Well, he fights like exactly what he is. A guy who physically and in terms of skills outmatched most of the people he fought on his way up really badly. And I think because of that, he developed a pretty freewheeling style, because a lot of the guys he fought in Russia just weren't able to put him in much danger. He didn't end up paying for it. At the UFC level, he is paying for it. Like, dudes are choking him out every other fight. But this should be a good bounce back for him against Newson. Newson, to me, it's not an exact like one-to-one comparison, but he almost reminds me of like bad Tyron Woodley. Like, he can wrestle, but he usually doesn't, and he spends too much time waiting for one huge counter to like turn the fight around or finish his foe. The problem for him is he's at bantamweight, so the overall power level is lower, and he doesn't have Tyron Woodley, I can change this fight with one punch, like reliable power. So
how's his rapping though? Is he a good rapper?
He's probably a better rapper than Woodley. Woodley does have a good ear for beats, though. He always had decent beats. I don't care if he's rapping that much, but here, if Morozov makes a mistake, Newson can capitalize. Like, Newson is a good grappler. If Morozov takes Newson down, gets sloppy, Newson can certainly sweep him, take his back, and put him to sleep for the third time in 5 fights. But I think that's the outside chance. I think Morozov he's at least going to draw a fun fight out of Newson. Newson will not be able to sit and wait against Morozov, who's very aggressive. But give me Morozov by decision here, and yeah, I'm not counting on him to finish Newson. Give me Morozov by decision in a one-sided but very fun fight.
Yeah, Journey Newsom. His name should be changed to Journeyman Newsom, because the guy, I mean, he is what he is. He's a low-level talent. I mean, he's got some pretty good footwork. I'll give him that. He likes to fight this like long range and then suddenly blitz into the pocket. He loves that like looping left hook. He does have power. I see he's a plus power guy. I kind of agree with you that he doesn't have, because he's a bantamweight, he's not going to knock you out with one shot. He could, but he'll throw these like spinning attacks, which I don't like. I think the best part of the game is actually his kicks. He's got some hard kicks. He's a serviceable wrestler. Like you talked about him being Tyron Woodley. I think that's a good comparison. And like you think he should wrestle, and he didn't have that explosion.
This is a Drew Dober card, so we can talk about people that look like they should be able to wrestle better than they can.
Yeah, but he does well to win scramble. He's more like a grappler than I'd say he's a wrestler. He did almost catch Ricardo Hamas in a guillotine, which is good. But I'm still worried about his shit. I mean, he got absolutely smashed by Randy Costa, and that is a loss that has not aged well at all. Morozov, he's a good athlete. He's well-rounded. I like on the feet that he's very relaxed, very composed. He cuts angles really well to set up shots. He's got some quick hands. He also got some plus power. I love that he throws combos and he adds kicks into his combinations. As you said, he blends them together well. I think his kicks are really good. I mean, he's a long rangey kind of guy. He mixes in takedown attempts with his striking, but you pointed out perfectly. I think he needs to improve his top control. We've seen him not have to get multiple takedowns because he can't keep someone down. If he gets on top, he goes to ground and pound, and before pinning down position, he's kind of like for a Eastern European guy, he's the opposite of a Dagestan wrestler. Like he's trying to land before trying to control position. He does have 3 submissions, so that's fun. I like this fight. I think this is one of the easier ones to pick on the card. I think Morozov just styles on Newsom. I think he's better than him everywhere. I think he's way better than him on the feet. I think he's just too fast. I don't think he stops Newsom. I just, like you said, I think we have a lopsided decision for Morozov.
Next up at UFC Fight Night 216 is a flyweight matchup between David Dvorak and Manel Kape. Dvorak, the 30-year-old Czech, is 20-4 overall. He is 3-1 in the UFC. That's the good news. The bad news is that the one is his last outing. He dropped a unanimous decision to Matheus Nicolau at UFC on ESPN Blades versus Dawkins back in March, which not only handed him his first UFC loss, but snapped a 16-fight winning streak for him. So he has all kinds of momentum. He'll look to get back a little bit of that at the expense of Kape. The 29-year-old Angolan is 17-6 overall. He is 2-2 since joining the UFC as the former Ryzen bantamweight champ, and then a full year layoff during the first year of COVID. He dropped his first 2 fights in the UFC to Alexandre Pantoja and to Nicolau before bouncing back with wins over Ode Osborne and Jalgas Jumagulov. Both of those first-round knockouts. The Osborne fight somewhat marred by the fact that Kape missed weight by a couple of pounds and had to have it explained to him by Daniel Cormier in the cage that he can't beg for a bonus if he blew weight. But I'm sure he's learned his lesson. And
dude, did he want a title shot?
he just the only tape he had of the UFC was Yoel Romero, and he just thought that's how it worked, you know.
That's the deal. Remember when Romero fought Phil Davis? He lost a decision, and he thought there was 2 more rounds. He was looking like, "What do you mean? It's 5 rounds." Fucking Yoel, what a gift! The gift that just keeps on giving.
He's a gift. Like, sometimes I'm like, how does a guy with an IQ that low like even manage to walk around and function in daily life? But yeah, he's pretty awesome. We miss you, Yoel.
No, we don't. Speak for yourself, Ben.
The odds here, pretty wide. Kape -240, Dvorak +200 on the comeback. Those of you who are partaking of this show in podcast form won't see the face that Keith just made. I'm definitely going to flip it to you, but you had the same reaction I did. I was a little surprised that Kape was more than a 2-1 favorite here. Yeah, Dvorak had all kinds of momentum, and it's not like he got blown out of the water.
Yeah,
tell me what you think here.
Yeah, Dvorak's good. That's why I'm surprised. I'm not surprised that Kape is the favorite. Bigger name, kind of beaten better competition. I didn't expect it to be that big. I figured it was like -160-ish would be kind of the range. Over 2-1. That's surprising. But I mean, Kape is good. I mean, he's a massive flyweight, especially if he doesn't make weight. I've compared him in the past to Takanori Gomi. I still think that's a really good comparison because he's a guy that he fights out of both stances, similar to Gomi used to, and he's this powerful striker that he drops his hands and he really relies solely on head movement, but that is just to slide out of range and then just explode with quick punches. He really sits on his punches and really steps in and whips those punches. One of, if not maybe the biggest puncher in the division. He's the least in the club. He also has got some good hard kicks to the body, kicks to the calves. He'll toss up a very fast high kick. One that he also uses it to close the distance. Like he'll throw a high kick to get into range to start throwing those power shots. Kind of like get you to raise your hands up so while he can take that space and then come back in with while you're kind of dropping your hands down. He's coming back in with some big ones. He showed he can wrestle a little bit, against Pantoja. But the one thing about him is if you stick him on his back, he struggles to get back up. I mean, Matthias Nicolau held him there. Oka Sasaki was another guy that had success with Kape on his back. Dvorak, we talking about Kape being a big flyweight. So is Dvorak. I mean, he's a long and lengthy guy. He's a counter striker that has some really good power. He keeps his legs underneath him, so he has a really strong base that helps him land power shots. He really wings his overhand right. Good kicks. He will wrestle. He's good at winning scrambles. I'd say similar to what I said about Journey Newsom. I think he's more of a grappler than a wrestler. He doesn't have a single takedown in his UFC career so far, but he has 8 submissions to his record. So if he gets there, especially if he can get Kape on his back, that might be his best avenue to victory. But I was surprised against Bruno Silva. He was taken down 3 times. Again, I kind of think that was an outlier than what it is, about him. I don't know if Dvorak can keep Kape down and to keep him there. That means he's going to have to strike with him and use his length from the outside. And I think he could do that. But the longer you stay on the feet with Kape, the better chance he has of landing a bomb. I actually think he does it here. I think Kape makes a strong argument for a title shot. Even if he misses weight, he might call for the title shot anyways. But I say Kape lands a big shot. I think he knocks out Dvorak in the very first round.
Wow. All right. So Keith, like recognizing that the line is a bit odd, but still coming out hot for Kape. And I totally get it.
What are you guys thinking? Yeah, he knocks him out in the first round.
Well, and I totally get it because, you know, just because you think someone's going to finish the other guy in the first round doesn't mean you think he's 10 times better. It's just that, you know, given the style matchup, that's the most likely chance. And I can see that happening. You know, Dvorak's been caught by a few of his opponents. His chin has proven to be solid, but nobody's chin is solid enough to take a couple of flush punches from Kape. I agree with you that in terms of...
I think like John Jones could take one from him, maybe.
I don't think he can reach John Jones's chin.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, in the chest, of course, Jones could take one. And I agree with you that Kape might be the hardest puncher in the division in terms of the combination of just how hard you can hit the bag in the gym versus your ability to deliver that artillery to someone's face in a fight. He has a history of doing it. I like the Gomi comparison a lot. I have Kape here as well. I think he will at least have Dvorak in trouble a couple of times. And while Dvorak has generally been comfortable on the feet, I mean, the reason he has no takedowns in his UFC fight so far is that he's generally been getting the better of things on the feet, and he's been fine with that. But I think at some points of this fight, he'll probably want it on the ground and might not be able to get it there. So give me Kape by knockout as well. I'm going to say second round, but doesn't diminish for me the fact that both these guys are probably top 10 flyweights on talent. Like Dvorak will certainly be back, and assuming Kape makes weight, he'll be well positioned in the division after Saturday going forward. We head now to the welterweight division for a matchup between Bryan Battle and Rinat Fakhretdinov. Battle, the 28-year-old from North Carolina, is 8-1 overall. He is 3-0 since joining the UFC as the middleweight winner of the 29th season of The Ultimate Fighter. However, he has since departed that division, and he is 1-0 since dropping to welterweight, a division that by the eyeball test, he probably belonged in all along. But his last outing was at 170 pounds, took him all of 45 seconds to knock out Takashi Sato with a head kick. He will look to keep the good vibes going here. As a short notice opponent for Fakhretdinov. This was originally scheduled to be Fakhretdinov versus Michael Morales. Morales was forced to withdraw. Battle is in. Fakhretdinov is 31-year-old from Moscow. Depending on where you look at his record, you'll either see him at 19-1, maybe 20-2. There are some fights early in his career where it's kind of nebulous whether it was an amateur tournament or they were professional fights or, kill me now, in the early teens, mid-teens in Russia and former Soviet republics, there were a bunch of tournaments where they would throw pros in against amateurs, and it's an absolute nightmare trying to untangle that because those fights, it can't be an amateur fight for one guy and a pro fight for another. So you either got this amateur who unwittingly has been turned pro without his knowledge, you know, or you got a pro who has like 8 fights as a pro and all of a sudden has 3 fights as an amateur in the middle of it after already being professional. It is pardon my French, it is a fucking nightmare. But anyway, we're calling him 19-1. He might be 20-2. He is 1-0 in the UFC. He debuted back in June at UFC Fight Night Volkov versus Rosenstrike, where he took a unanimous decision over Andreas Michailidis. He also will be looking to keep the momentum going here, and he is a moderate favorite to do so. This fight is new enough that as of noon on Sunday, there were no odds at all. Right now, there are odds out on a couple of books. It's looking at Fakhretdinov minus 185, Battle plus 160. But look for those to change because, again, they are fresh off the presses. This is a very different fight than Fakhretdinov had been preparing for because Michael Morales, that would have been like explosive because when I look at Fakhretdinov, I see a guy who is a fast starter, comes out like his hair is on fire, and like is looking for the early knockout wherever possible. And Morales has got a lot of that as well. Morales is like a big, long, lengthy kickboxer with power who comes out really aggressive. And Battle is very different from that. He's probably a little more diverse striker than Morales, but also a willing ground fighter. And yeah, it's a very different stylistic look than Fakhretdinov had been preparing for. I'm interested to see how that affects him, if at all, and if there's anything that Battle can use to take it, to take advantage there. Give me your thoughts on this one and who wins. And obviously, you probably didn't get too far in study for it, but do you like this matchup better than the Morales matchup, or would you still like to see that at some point down the road?
I think it's even. Like the Morales is a nice young prospect that would be interesting to moving forward, and I think both these guys are pretty good. Bryan Battle, someone that I'm a little bit more familiar with of the two. It's also kind of happens when you go through film study and there's 14 fights, you kind of have to sacrifice a couple some, and when you have one that we didn't really know what the matchup was going to be, that kind of happens.
Yeah.
So this one, I will be honest, I'm not as prepared as I would other fights. Bryan Battle, what I've seen of him going back to like the Ultimate Fighter, one of the weird seasons I watch every single, not a good season, the Ultimate Fighter, but I watch every season, every single episode for some reason. He's a high volume striker who he really conserves his energy because he saves his power because he just kind of touches. He likes to move forward using that pressure. He really wants to kind of control the pace of the fight, the distance of the fight. He's got some good variety in his attacks. He mixes punches and kicks together well. Has a really good kicking game. A lot of teep kicks. His last fight, he had that beautiful high kick knockout. I love the setup. It was like a left jab to a right high kick, a really good combo. He does have some defensive holes. One, he keeps his chin in the air. He also he rolls with punches, which I'm not, which helps you not get hit clean, but also never looks good for the judges. He's stronger. He's a big guy. He can battle in the clinch. I mean, he beat up Andre Petrowski in the clinch, which is a win. Again, it was on the Ultimate Fighter show, but that's a win that really aged well. Good takedown defense. Showed some really good balance on one foot and stuff. When taken down, really hard to hold down. He worked right back to his feet. Petrowski had him down at times and had his back, and he didn't panic. He worked his way. He has 4 subs in his career. One was against Petrowski in the show. Another was Gilbert Urbina in the final. So pretty well-rounded. Rinat, you mentioned he's a brawler. He gets in there. He wings hard looping shots. He has huge power. He's got 11 knockouts. His check left hook is his best thing. I like that he goes to the body. He's a good wrestler. He's actually been wrestling internationally, which is good to see. Good entries. Has 5 submission wins. This is a tough one because, again, like I said, we ran out of time to watch film, and Rinat is the better wrestler. But Battle has done pretty well against wrestlers, and he's big, and he's got a good kicking game. I'm going to go with the upset here. I think he outpoints Fakhretdinov. I'm sorry if I started saying his name wrong. I think he lands shots from range, maybe with those kicks, and I say he does enough to weather the early storm, and I think he pulls away with the decision.
I can absolutely see that happening. Battle, I at 185, he's a guy that tended to be a bit of a builder, or at least an outlaster of his opponents. I'm interested to see whether that carries over to 170, because obviously it took him no time at all to plunk Takashi Sato, so we don't know what third round welterweight Bryan Battle looks like. I expect we'll need to see it here, and if he maintains that same kind of durability and cardio at 170, I could totally see him pulling off the upset here. I'm gonna go the other way. I'm gonna be the chicken and take Fakhretdinov, but it's not a comfortable pick. Fakhretdinov's UFC debut, that was a week I was out, and so you covered that with a special guest substitute, and you compared Fakhretdinov style-wise to Fedor a little bit, not in terms of quality.
Now I'm picking Bryan Battle to beat him.
Yeah, well, you were sure to say not at in terms of his level, but
if Ryan Bader gets hurt or something, then tell Scott Coker to trade for Bryan Battle.
I can see Fakhretdinov, like packing away like 2 rounds, like winning the first 2 rounds, and then holding on against Battle to outlast him in the third and picking up a decision. And that's what I'm kind of picking here. I expect that this fight will be a whole lot of fun because Fakhretdinov's going to come right at him, throwing heat. Battle's going to try to evade, try to touch, just, try to, avoid getting knocked out. And if he can avoid getting knocked out, it is a pretty favorable style matchup for him, but I think he's going to get hit enough that he's probably going to drop the first 2 rounds here. So give me Fakhretdinov by decision. Next up, the lightweights take the cage as it is Rafa Garcia versus Maheshate. Garcia, the 28-year-old Mexican, is 13-3 overall. He is 2-3 since joining the UFC as a former Combate Americas, now Combate Global lightweight champ. He lost his last time out. It was a unanimous decision against Drakkar Klose at UFC 277 back in July. Prior to that, he had won 2 in a row over Natan Levy and Jesse Ronson. So he'll be looking to regain some momentum at the expense of Maheshate. The 23-year-old from Southwest China is 9-1 overall. He is 1-0 since joining the UFC out of the 2021 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He debuted at UFC 275 this June, knocking out Steve Garcia in about a minute and a half. One punch KO, just flattened the man. So he is going to look to extend that positive momentum as well. He is not favored to do so. Rafa Garcia, the slight favorite here. He's -120. Maheshate available out there at even money, +100. Keith, who you got in this one? And I have the feeling that I know what your answer to this is going to be, but
okay.
Regardless of who wins this one, do you think Maheshate probably has the higher ceiling in the division?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not even close. I mean, Rafa Garcia, he's a card filler. In the right sense, like he's a minus athlete. For him to be in a position where he kind of he has a style that he kind of puts himself in a battle no matter what, like, which is good. He's like a Mexican version of a Julian Rosa. Mm-hmm. He marches down his foe. He's got good volume. He wants to get in the pocket and throw down. He throws hard looping power shots. He will wrestle. That's why I kind of compared him to a guy who, besides wanting to brawl, will wrestle. A good reactionary double. Good at turning the corner and driving through the hips really well. Especially his last fight, I was really impressed with that. He's a little too inconsistent, though. He'll often just drive through the legs without any setups. He'll overreach on takedown attempts, very like Michael Chiesa style. But he is relentless. He has a tough man mindset where he'll get the fight to the ground. He has power to just kind of grab a leg and lift you up too. And he had a submission. He got a nice submission against Jesse Ronson. He's got a good chin. I mean, he had some big shots in the fight against Nasrat Haqparast. He showed a really good cardio against Natan Levy, like made that a battle. And he's got really good output. Like I said, like when you look at this guy, there's nothing stands out like, oh, this is this beautiful combination, or this is this beautiful skill set. He's just this dog. Maheshate, he's a massive guy, very physically strong, and he's only, I think he's 23. Yep. And you said he was 23. Yeah. So he can make really big improvements from his last fight. He's a high volume striker, very poised, accurate. His right hand is really good. He's got some good power. He knocked out Steve Garcia, which was that was his last fight, right?
Yeah.
The last fight was knocked out Steve Garcia in his last fight, which was really good, showing big improvements. Good kicking game, deep kicks up the middle, front kicks. He threw flying knee a few times in the past, but he's been hit and he's been hurt more than you think. He's got some defensive holes. He stands up a little too tall. He lacks head movement. I haven't seen too much still in his grappling, being that he's so young. He's got a lot of experience for a young guy. I haven't seen too much in grappling to really break it down. As far as prediction goes, Maheshate, I mean, he has the physical tools to be a star. Plus, adding that age, who knows what improvements he can make and what he's added since his last fight. If he pieces up Garcia, I wouldn't be surprised at all. However, Garcia's the guy that he's going to make this a fight. He's going to stay in his face. I think he might sneak in a takedown too, and we kind of will find out about Maheshate's ground game. I think he makes this a grindy kind of fight. I think it's going to be a war, and we're going to see what Maheshate's made of. He's young. He might take a tough loss in a back and forth fight. I actually think this is one's going to happen. I'm gonna go with an upset. I'm going to say Garcia wins by split decision.
Wow, Keith coming hot out the gate with 2 upset picks in the first 4 fights at UFC Vegas 66. I can only aspire to that kind of bravery and confidence in my own instincts and research abilities, and I fall short here again. Garcia, I mean, he has routes to victory, and for what it's worth, I mean, he's fought guys that hit pretty hard. I mean, he lasted 3 rounds with Nasrat Haqparast, who has good power. But man, just I think Maheshate, like, physically he's going to be much bigger. He is, as you like to point out, he's at that age where he's likely to, you know, make big strides from one fight to the next. He's at a good team. Like, teams in China are not created equal, but Enbo Gedu Fight Club is one of the good ones. You know, like, short of coming to the U.S. and going to like Team Alpha Male, it's probably the best you can do in China. You know, I'm expecting Maheshate. I don't know if it'll be a full, like, coming out party where he just looks day and night better than before and, like, blows Garcia out of his sneakers. But give me Maheshate to, you know, win a pretty straightforward decision where he does have to go through a scare or 2 along the way, but he gets it done and goes to 2-0 in the UFC. Next up, we head back to the men's bantamweight division for a matchup designed to torture play-by-play announcers and color commentators, whoever they may be this Saturday. May God have mercy on their souls. It is Said Nurmagomedov versus Saidyokub Kakhramonov. Poor Jay Petrie on the keys for Sherdog. Nurmagomedov, the 30-year-old Dagestani, is 16-2 overall. He is 5-1 in the UFC. He dropped a unanimous decision to Hani Barcelos in his 3rd UFC fight back in December of 2019, almost exactly 3 years ago. Since then, he's rattled off 3 more wins over Mark Striegel, Cody Stamann, and Douglas Silva de Andrade. He will look to make it 4 straight here at the expense of Kakhramonov. The 27-year-old, I'm going to get this wrong. I believe he's from Tajikistan, but lives and trains out of Chicago. 27 years old, 10-2 as a pro, 2-0.
Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan? Thank you. There. See, Keith, keep me in line on my...
you know me, man. When it comes to geography, I'm way up there with it.
But he dropped into the UFC last August and has made a good impression. Choked Trevin Jones to sleep late in the fight back at UFC on ESPN Cannonier versus Gastelum last August. Came back this July and took a unanimous decision over Ronnie Lawrence at UFC on ESPN Dos Anjos versus Fiziev. As one might expect of 2 fighters with such positive momentum and such difficult to pronounce names, the odds are nearly even. Nurmagomedov -120, Kakhramonov available even money +100. Keith, this is another fight where it's very much like the Dvorak versus Kape fight to me, where both of these guys might be top 10 guys, but one of them's got to lose right now. You know, it's, but because
weird to have both these fights so low on the card too.
It's strange that all this stuff is on the undercard, but it's not like the main card is bad. Like, this is just a good card. Here, I mean, Nurmagomedov, obviously, when you're talking about Dagestani fighters, there's a spectrum. On the one side, you have the unathletic grinder who just never lets any fight get out of first gear and is just a takedown machine. And on the other side, you have the all spinning shit all the time, like true wild man. And most of them fit somewhere on that spectrum. You know, like, it's not like you're either Rustam Khabilov or you're Zabit Magomed-Sharipov. It's not like you're either one or the other. Nurmagomedov, to me, fits very much right in the middle. He can wrestle. He can do the get the leg right against the fence, the Dagestani handcuff, wrist control, and like punch you in the face until you give up your back. But he also does love to throw spinning stuff. He has the uninhibited kicking game of a man who is not afraid of being taken down. he has that perfect combination of very competitively sound and very entertaining, which not all of your, Akhmat fight team guys are. I like him against Kakhramonov in this fight. I think he's, as much as I like Kakhramonov, and again, I think both these guys are probably top 10 or top 15 people on talent. Nurmagomedov he's bigger, he's more experienced. They're both pretty much in their prime as bantamweights. I mean, one of them's 30, the other one's 27. But I think Nurmagomedov is going to have the safety outlet to take this fight to the ground if he wants, and I don't know if the reverse is true. So we'll either get an entertaining battle on the feet where Nurmagomedov probably is just getting slightly the better of things, or if Nurmagomedov takes Kakhramonov down, I think he'll be able to do it. It'll be at the time and in the choosing and in the position, the time of and position of his choosing, and I think he'd be able to do damage, rack up control time, maybe threaten with submissions himself while fending off the sweep and submission attempts of Kakhramonov. So give me Nurmagomedov in this fight in a decision, and it won't be a fight of the night contender. We've got too many obvious bangers coming up the card, but it'll definitely be one of the more enjoyable fights in the evening, and one that we might look back on a few years from now as being like a pivotal matchup for the division.
Yeah, I mean, other than probably the co-main event, this is the one that probably has the most title relevance, I guess. I mean, I guess the main event too, but more of if someone's holding a title one day, like the talent level is a really good matchup. Nurmagomedov he's a really poised striker. I think you said it best. He's definitely that. He can wrestle, obviously, but he's definitely that striking. More like an Ankalaev Dagestan, where he's technically sound. He'll point from distance, but then he'll explode when there's an opening. He'll whip punches in there, similar to what we kind of saw Paddy Pimblett doing to Jared Gordon, where even if he's blocking it, he's throwing hard enough that it looks like it's hurting. He's got plus power. He makes the mistake of actually losing some power because he pulls his head back a little bit to avoid strikes. He kind of pulls his punches that way. But he's got a really good kicking game. Great dexterity in his hips. He really sneaks kicks in and hides them behind combinations. I think it's very similar to like what Stephen Thompson, prime Stephen Thompson did. Or actually, I shouldn't say prime. The last one was pretty good too. But I should say younger Stephen Thompson.
Stephen Thompson just has his prime is like 15 years apparently.
Yeah, I know. So Nurmagomedov, he's a good wrestler. He's very like a scrambly, funk more style. But I've said this many times. I don't think he's a great wrestler. I think because of his last name being Nurmagomedov, we think of him as this elite wrestler. I mean, he can obviously get takedowns and he can hold people down. But if I was ranking the Nurmagomedovs, he'd actually be on the lower end of the spectrum in the wrestling. Kakhramonov, he's looked really good so far in the UFC. I mean, he dominated Trevin Jones, dominated Ronnie Lawrence. Those are, to start your UFC career, that's two really good guys. Like, that's not what most people get coming in. He's a pocket, I should say really good, but you know what I mean? Like, they're tougher than they're not the lowest level guys in the division. How about that? That's what I should say. He's a pocket boxer who can really throw some hard, wild shots. I've compared him in the past to like Wanderlei Silva, where he throws these looping style punches, just action. He really obviously telegraphs his shots because of that. But if he lands, he has serious power. He's got 5 knockouts in his career, and he's a really good wrestler. I mean, he took down Umar Nurmagomedov. He ragdolled Ronnie Lawrence. Just body locked, threw his opponent around. Good top game. Has some great back takes against Ronnie Lawrence. He has a submission threat. He has 3 subs in his career, and I've seen him in the past. He has a card to go 25 minutes. I mean, I was so impressed in his last fight against Ronnie Lawrence, being that it was such a wrestling heavy match, and he didn't get tired. And for someone who goes for so many takedowns, I think this is an incredible matchup. On the feet, it's Nurmagomedov's technical striking and his tools, especially those kicks, against Kakhramonov's like power. But that's not what I'm hoping I get. I'm hoping we get a grappling matchup because I really want to see who's a better grappler. I've seen Nurmagomedov tire a little bit, And I think Kakhramonov is going to make him work in that grappling. I think he has the wrestling advantage. I think he has the cardio advantage. So I'm going to go with another upset win. I'm taking Kakhramonov by decision.
You are on fire today. That is, for those keeping track at home, 3 upset picks in the first 5 fights. And you know what?
Let's judge that a little later on if I'm on fire.
Well, here's the thing.
It's like a good trailer, like a trailer to a movie that looks like, oh, that looks. I remember Orlando.
In
Bloom.
a world where.
What was that movie Orlando Bloom was in right after The Lord of the Rings, when it was like this hot thing, and it was
Pirates of the Caribbean, or between then?
No, it wasn't Pirates of the Caribbean. It was a war movie. It was like a medieval war movie.
Kingdom of Heaven.
Yeah, Kingdom. I remember that trailer. I was like, oh, this movie's gonna be banging, and I watched it. It was terrible. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible, but I thought it was gonna be like up there with like Braveheart and Gladiator, one of these, and no, it wasn't. No. But, this might be the Kingdom of Heaven picks right here. I might be the Orlando Bloom of the Sherdog Radio Network.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, on these previews, Keith and I will both sometimes talk about the confident kicking game of a man who's not afraid to be taken down. Well, Keith has the confident picking game of a man who knows he's not going to have to do a recap for this event, so he can just sort of wait for it all to blow over. Yeah. You won't see him for a month.
Hey. Oh yeah, Jared Cannonier is definitely going to go with a flying triangle to finish.
I mean, having said that, I'm betting you're right on 2 out of the 3. Like, these are all fights where the underdog has real obvious routes to victory. We head now to the middleweight division, knock on wood, for a matchup between Julian Marquez and Deron Winn. Marquez, the 32-year-old Kansas City native, is 9-3 overall. He's 3-2 since joining the UFC out of the very first season of Dana White's Contender Series. He started 1-1 in the UFC, took off almost 3 full years due to some severe injuries. I think he had like a biceps tear that required surgery, but he was gone for all of 2019 and 2020. He is 2-1 since coming back. He's beaten Maki Pitolo, beaten Sam Alvey, got knocked out by Gregory Rodriguez in his most recent outing. That was at the Kattar versus Emmett fight night back in June, his first loss since his return from injury. He's going to look to get things back on track against Winn. The 33-year-old St. Louis area native is 7-3 overall. He is 2-3 since joining the UFC out of the star-studded Golden Boy MMA Liddell versus Ortiz 3 card back in 2018.
Oh, God.
Joined the UFC, got right out of the gate, taking down Rhode Island's second greatest fighter, Eric Spicely, then dropped 2 in a row to Darren Stewart and Gerald Meerschaert. Came back with a decision win over Antonio Arroyo, bringing him to his matchup at that same Kattar versus Emmett card where he got knocked out in the second round by Phil Hawes. He's going to look to get things back on track against Marquez. He is not favored to do so. Marquez is minus 165 or so right now. Winn plus 130 on the comeback. Keith, this matchup is full of surprises for me. I'm surprised that Deron Winn is still in the UFC. I mean, I know why he's still in the UFC, but I'm still mildly surprised. It's gone beyond he's tight with Daniel Cormier, and it's gone to the point where, do they think he is Daniel Cormier? Do they see him passing in the hallway and they're like, oh, got to keep that guy on roster? Yeah. I mean, he's 2-3 in the UFC, and he has completed the hat trick of things that get you fired from the UFC. He has missed weight, he has failed a drug test, and he has been forced to pull out on weigh-in day.
But he did the one thing that gets you not fired, and that's get yourself attached to a megastar. It's pretty much the Lobov move. It's the what was that guy that got? What was the guy that? Nick Maxim. Oh no, actually Maximoff got fired. But in fairness, Diaz was out the door. So
it's the Lobov comparison. I mean, they have about the same reach.
Yeah.
I'm mildly surprised that Julian Marquez. I'm not surprised that he's still in the UFC, but I'm surprised that he still bothers because I mean. Outside of the cage, you know, he plays disc golf. He has a regular podcast with like former porn star Kendra Lust, where they just talk about whatever. And
hold on a second. Who?
Kendra Lust, like real popular porn star.
Yeah,
like,
I know who she is.
Yeah,
no, I mean I know her because she's an MMA fan, right?
Yeah, she's an MMA fan. They have a podcast together.
With Julian Marquez?
Yeah, with Julian Marquez.
I didn't know that. Good for him.
Yeah, like I don't see why he bothers, but man, this fight, like Julian Marquez, he is what he is. He is a fun mid-card fighter, and I'm interested to see how the UFC handles him, because for the last 3 or 4 weeks, every week we've been like, well, here's a guy somewhat connected to Glory MMA. Let's see how the UFC deals with this one. Like, who's going to corner him? Like, what does the booth say about him? But it's generally been people that are kind of peripherally attached. Like TJ Brown split time at Glory, but never really left his home gym in Arkansas. Julian Marquez is a Glory OG. Like, he's been a Glory MMA and fitness guy for several years, like before the place blew up. I gather that he kind of relocated his training to Vegas and kind of finished out his camp, you know, like once Glory truly, like well and truly caught on fire about three weeks ago. If that affects him in any way, if it affects his preparation, like just his mental preparation, his physical preparation, if his preparation, like physically or mentally, is affected by this at all, maybe that compromises his performance somewhat. But the thing is, it's not like Winn is this guy that can starch him with like one punch, or, you know, is going to slide in and heel hook him in a moment of, you know, like in a moment that where he's not guarding himself properly. Like, Winn is the only way he beats Marquez is if he can take him down and hold him down for 3 rounds, and that just doesn't seem likely. You know, Marquez is a slugger who can grapple, and he sort of has made his calling card that he is a bit of a builder, or at least a survivor as fights go along. Like, you know, his first win back from his injury was him kind of getting pieced up by Maki Pitolo and then choking him out in the 3rd round after, you know, getting yelled at by James Krause. That's almost the best Winn can hope for, is to like hang on and get finished in dramatic fashion in the 3rd round. And I feel like I'm being mean here, and you know, it's not in my nature to like be mean or negative to fighters, but like, Winn just isn't UFC material. It's hard for me to feel too much pity for a 5'6" guy that misses.
Since when? Since when do we not be mean to fighters?
I said me.
Oh, okay.
No,
Right.
I mean, we talked about this ahead of his fight with Hawes. You know, where like there couldn't possibly be a worse matchup for Winn than Hawes, because Hawes is bigger, an even better wrestler, and hits way harder.
No, not in a straight wrestling match. MMA wrestling, not in a straight wrestling.
I mean, yeah, Winn was a 2-time, you know, NAIA, you know, champ. Like he but. Well, for one thing, in college, they probably wouldn't have been wrestling in the same weight class. Well, no, I guess Winn wrestled at one. Dude, yeah, Winn wrestled at 184, and Hawes wrestled at 174, didn't he? Holy crap. Anyway, yeah, Winn's college wrestling was definitely a 184, but Marquez isn't a great matchup for Winn either. I expect that it's going to be like a brawl of sloppy hooks on the feet, and Marquez is going to get the better of it, because it's not like Winn is blindingly fast, and Marquez is going to have tons of reach on him. If Winn tries to take Marquez down, he might be able to, but it's not a guarantee, and I don't know if he'll be able to keep him down. And Winn kind of being as short and compact as he is, when he's able to keep people down, to maintain top control, seems to deplete his gas tank almost as fast as theirs. So yeah, this is just another bad matchup for Deron Winn, but there aren't any good matchups for him at 185 in the UFC. No. So give me Marquez by decision, and I can't wait to hear what he has to say on the mic afterwards. You know, hopefully, I imagine he's moved on from calling for a date with Miley Cyrus. I want to know what he wants now. It's much more interesting than hearing people beg for $50,000 from Dana. Can't wait to hear it. Marquez by decision.
Yeah, I'm sorry I was distracted. I was looking up who Kendra Lust was.
In the event your airplane is forced down over water, Kendra Lust can be used as a flotation device.
Yeah, I was doing it for research purposes, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, I was also thinking about, you mentioned Nurmagomedov and Deron Winn having the same amount of reach, and I was just thinking about them having an arm wrestling match against each other. Like I just imagine them having an arm wrestling match, but instead of doing it on like a table, it's on like a nightstand or something.
Dude, I was gonna say, if they went to Power Slap League, they'd have to get a smaller table for them, or they wouldn't be able to reach each other.
Yeah. The first person to miss in Power Slap. Oh, fantastic. Let's get out of Lobov and Deron Winn to slap each other. That'd be fantastic. I said, I'm not into this power slap shit. Just like bare knuckle out. But if you get Deron Winn and Armin Lobov to slap each other, I'll watch that shit.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And then I just think of like Deron Winn going to like the Pan Am games while other guys are like eating Nutri-Grain bars and oatmeal. He's got like a bacon, egg, and cheeseburger as he's warming up with a Wendy's or something as he's warming up. Julian Marquez is a huge bricked up muscle dude who's like this true alpha male who does a podcast with a porn star. I mean, like, this freaking guy, what a man. Yeah. His fighting style, he loves to brawl. He just loves to march forward, throw these tight hooks, these overhand shots. He walks forward. He's willing to eat a shot to take one. That has usually been pretty good for him, except for his last fight against Gregory Rodriguez, who really is one of the biggest punchers in the division.
Yeah.
Marquez has hard kicks. He likes to target the body with those. He has a very good, dirty boxing clinch style. He would just lean on his opponent there or just kind of land some short shots. Okay grappler. He stays busy and scrambling. Weak defensive wrestler, though. But if he gets on top, he has some mean ground and pound. He did submit Darren Stewart in their fight. But he's tired out in the past, and that's because of his reckless style now. Deron Winn, I've mentioned this before about how short he is. He's 5'6". And Jose Aldo, bantamweight, is 5'7". They're four weight classes difference between them. We said about him fighting at welterweight, he could fight at probably lightweight, and he's probably still be short. He's a wrestle boxer that loves to pocket brawl, but he struggles to get
just real quick. Allow me to interrupt because you mentioned him already earlier in the show. I'm going to point out that Deron Winn is 2 inches shorter than Ulka Sasaki.
Ulka Sasaki's a flyweight.
Yep.
Jesus Christ.
And granted, he looks like a praying mantis, but I'm just saying that.
It could be like a cartoon of there's always a cartoon the tall skinny one and the short fat one.
Yeah, like Ren and Stimpy, or every Disney cartoon now has a Ren and Stimpy type where there's the short stocky comic relief guy and the tall skinny one. Yeah, Pumbaa and Timon. Dude, they're totally Pumbaa and Timon.
Yeah, there you go. Deron Winn is the freaking Timon of
he's Pumbaa. Yeah, Deron Winn is Pumbaa, like the little warthog guy.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I fucked that up. Yeah. Excuse me. But just when we got props for the Lord of the Rings reference, I screw up The Lion King. He wants to get in the pocket, but he really struggles to get there because he struggles with reach. He doesn't have much head movement to get inside without getting blasted. If he gets inside, he's strong because of his stature. He's good dirty boxing, but he's open to knees due to his shortness, knees to the head, knees to the body. Now, he is an elite wrestler on paper, and that's the key word. I'm saying paper. I mean, like you mentioned, he's a NAIA national champion. He went on the freestyle.
Yeah.
What'd you say?
He was a medalist at the Pan Am Games, wasn't he?
Yeah, he took bronze in that. He went on. He's got wins on the freestyle wrestling scene over Pat Downey, over Jaden Cox. Jaden Cox is a 2-time world champion. You're talking about Olympic bronze medalist. Mm-hmm. Jaden Cox has wins over Bo Nickel in the 19 World Team Trials. I mean, Jaden Cox is elite of the elite in the world, not just in America. So that's what Winn can be, but Winn can get takedowns with body locks. He gets some penetration steps, but he's one of these wrestlers that his style of wrestling it just doesn't translate over. He gassed out badly. He gassed out against Gerald Mershot. He gassed out against Darren Stewart. In fairness, he didn't gas out against Antonio Arroyo, and he had a really high pace fight against Phil Hawes, and he didn't gas out. Now he's insanely tough. He ate some huge shots from Phil Hawes and kept coming until he couldn't. Until his body finally just failed him. This is a really fun fight. I really think both guys can kind of brawl it out. However, I'm not high on either guy. Winn should have a massive wrestling advantage, but Marquez is mentally tough. He's much bigger. He's gonna, if Winn takes him down, he's going to make Winn work in every position. Even if he loses early rounds, I feel like there'll be like a turning point where Winn starts to fade and Marquez comes on strong. I think Winn gets tired. I think Marquez lands a big shot. I think it's gonna come late. Give me Marquez by third round TKO.
Next up at UFC Vegas 66 is another matchup that is sure to trip up the announcers at least once, as it is Jake Matthews versus Matthew Semelsberger. Matthews, the 28-year-old Australian, is 18-5 overall. He's 11-5 in the UFC. That number sounds better once you realize that since moving up from lightweight to welterweight, he is 7-2. He did win his last time out. It was a knockout of Andre Fialho at UFC 275 back in June in the second round after a pretty rousing 7.5 minutes of action. That allowed him to get back on track after his submission loss to Sean Brady last March. He will look to make it 2 in a row at the expense of Semelsberger. The 30-year-old from Maryland is 10-4 overall. He's 4-2 in the UFC. He lost his last time out. It was a unanimous decision against Alex Morono at UFC 277 in July. That put the brakes on a 2-fight win streak for him over Martin Sano and AJ Fletcher. Odds here, pretty wide. Matthews, minus 240, Semelsberger plus 200 on the comeback. Keith, I'm going to toss this one to you first. Two things surprised me here. One, I mean, I am surprised that the line is as wide as it is. I can't believe that Jake Matthews is 2 years younger than Matthew Semelsberger. And it's because he was so young when he came to the UFC. I mean, I remember him being, he was the youngest. I think he was the youngest fighter in the UFC at one point. And I remember him like calling out Sage Northcutt because they were the two youngest male fighters in the UFC, and they happened to be in like adjacent divisions. And that's a reminder that Sage Northcutt himself was still only like 28 or 29. But I think I wrote Matthews off as kind of a busted prospect or just another guy without realizing how much better he's been since moving up to 170.
Yeah, he's been pretty good.
And there's something in me that thinks that even though he's older than Matthews, Semelsberger still has more of a prospect feel, and I might be writing him off a little prematurely, but let me know what you think of this fight, who wins and how.
Yeah, Matthews is a really good athlete. Like that's something I didn't think before, but he just seems that he's gotten older. He's gotten a little bit quicker, moves better. He's looked really good lately. I think his striking has made huge improvements since, like you were talking about as a prospect. He used to be like a one-dimensional guy. Now he's a good counter striker, that kind of slip and rip style. His counter right hand is probably his best strike. He can get a little loopy at times with his shots, but he's got some good pop in his hands. He can also be a headhunter, which I don't like. He needs to start working the body, but he's got good footwork. He moves well. Good at changing the ranges where the striking kind of confuses opponents. He can be gun shy a little bit though. He doesn't throw enough. His striking has really come along. It's still to set up his wrestling. That's his bread and butter. He's a good wrestler, good entries, strong top game, good hard ground and pound. That's another thing that's really come along. Before he would kind of hold opponents down and kind of stall them. Now he's landed some mean ground and pound. I think there's some of that just comes with like growing into his body and becoming, like a man. He advances position well on the ground. He has a submission there. He has 7 submission wins. Semelsberger is a really strong athlete. He's explosive. He's a boxer with really fast hands. He has that kind of Chris Curtis high guard defense where it's a very boxing style. Slip and rip right hand is his best blow. I love the attacks the body. He has some serious, just raw power from his an explosion. I mean, we saw that against, just absolute destroying Jason Witt, Martin Sano. He does have a lot of defensive flaws. One is he backs straight up. Two, he has that high guard defense, which opens up his body, opens up takedowns. He also can be gun shy. And besides like not throwing enough, he can look for, like, to try to land a single blow, perfect shot. Perfect example was Alex Morono. Morono was getting in and out of range on him, tagging him up, and he would just continue trying to throw one shot. And by the time he threw the punch, Moreno was already way out of the range, so he was kind of missing. He's an underrated offensive wrestler, but he really he'll get a takedown or two in it, but he really needs to improve his takedown defense. He hasn't showed anything in the grappling. I mean, Carlton Minus took his back, which a couple times is not a good look. And he's also faded late in fights, even in fights where he hurt guys. Like he hurt Moreno late in their fight, and he didn't have the gas tank to kind of finish it. Semelsberger has some serious power, though I can't stop thinking about the fight against AJ Fletcher where Fletcher just kept taking him down. That bothers me. I think Matthews is going to do the same thing. I think he's going to press the action. I think he's going to land enough takedowns to tire Semelsberger out and just kind of cruise to a decision. I wouldn't be surprised if Matthews gets a late stoppage if Semelsberger is completely gassed, but maybe a submission or two. But I'll give Semelsberger. I do like Semelsberger because of that raw power. He has to improve his defensive wrestling, and Matthews I just think is a bad stylistic matchup. So give me Matthews by decision.
Yeah, I'm with you here. There seems to be a pretty obvious route to victory for Matthews. I think Semelsberger is a guy who is either going to turn a corner and become a monster, or is just going to kind of taunt and tantalize us forever because there is so much physical promise out there. He has such impressive raw physical tools. Like you mentioned, he's a big guy. He's got good reach and just has a ton of power on his shots. But yeah, just feels very raw. Like you pointed out, Morono beat him mostly by throwing in combination, where Semelsberger was, throwing single shots, and Morono grounded him. Offensive wrestling is not Alex Morono's forte, but Morono got him down with relative ease in the second round of their fight. If Morono can do that, a guy that he is definitely an overachiever in comparison to his physical gifts. Matthews, a guy that is just growing into his physical gifts right now and has always been a better grappler than striker, in my opinion, should be able to do so. Give me Matthews. Considering that, as you pointed out, Semelsberger has kind of faded late. It might be a symptom of him being that big and, maybe having a substantial weight cut. Give me Matthews by third round submission. Wears him down and tired Semelsberger. Maybe we continue the streak of exhausted rear naked chokes turning into face cranks in on UFC cards for another week. But yeah, Matthews by third round sub for me.
I think he made a good point. He might be a guy that might be better off moving up.
It's not like he'd be undersized at 185.
No. He's got power and he's got speed, and moving up, he might even have more power and more speed.
Yeah, I mean, he's taller and has longer reach than Julian Marquez, and we just talked about.
Yeah, and it's a weaker division too.
Yes. Next up, we head to the strawweight division for something of a mirror match. Two women who are both 7-2, who are both 2-1 in the UFC, and who both came to the UFC through the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. It is Cheyanne Vlismas versus Cory McKenna. Vlismas, the 27-year-old Floridian, 7-2 overall, 2-1 in the UFC. She dropped her UFC debut, getting head and arm thrown all over the place by Montserrat Conejo. That was back at UFC on ESPN, Brunson versus Holland last March. She came back from that rather deflating loss with two straight wins over Gloria DePaula and Mallory Martin. The most recent of those, the Martin win, was last December, almost exactly a year ago. For a variety of reasons, she is just barely now fighting for the first time in 2022. Kind of a combination of, I believe, injuries and some personal upheaval. You will notice that she is no longer Mrs. JP Bays, but she makes her return to the cage and is going to be looking for her third win in a row against McKenna, the 23-year-old Welsh woman who goes by Poppins, 7-2 overall. Again, 2-1 in the UFC. She debuted with a win over Kay Hansen back in November of 2020, dropped a split decision to Elise Reed last March, and came back with only the second Von Flue choke in women's strawweight history against Miranda Granger this August at UFC on ESPN, Santos versus Hill. So she'll look to make it 2 in a row here. She is the moderate underdog. Vlismas minus 190, McKenna plus 160. Keith, 115? It's a strange division. It looks like it's finally about to crack open. You know, the very famous traffic jam at the top of the division. It's a pretty good time to string together a couple wins and appear in the bottom reaches of that top 10 or top 15. The winner here, I mean, if it's Vlismas, that's 3 in a row for her. If it's McKenna, I mean, she's still 3-1 in the UFC. Which one of these women gets it done? And considering that they're both pretty young, one is extremely young, what kind of upside do you see for them?
I think both of these. I think they're both pretty decent. And McKenna, you mentioned McKenna. I think she's like what 22, 23 years old. She's really young. So,
and as you pointed out, she looks 12.
She looks really young. So does the. It's so funny that Raul Rojas kid being 18 years old, but that Cameron Simon. I think he's what, like 21, 22, something like that. He's really young too. He looks younger than the high school kid. He looks.
No, Simon is the one that looks like a high school wrestler.
If he showed up and he said he was a freshman, like I'd believe him. Like he's like, I'm 15. Like, okay.
Maybe he and McKenna can like go to prom. You know, they'll need a ride.
There you go. Let's match make the South African and the Wales fighter. Yeah, and Vlismas, she's a good athlete. She's got this like taekwondo background. You see that style in her footwork and especially her kicks. She has fast hands. She throws straight shots right down the pipe. Her straight right is a really good shot. Her left hook is probably her second best blow. She has some decent pop in her hands. She has rocked and dropped several fighters in the past, which I like. I like her kicking game. She loves teep kicks. She's got some good hard body kicks. She does like that Holly Holmes side push kick. She will wrestle, though she does need to set up her entries a little bit. She can kind of shoot a little too far away. But if she doesn't get entries, she can also get body lock takedowns. She does, because she's a female, she loves going towards that headlock throw, which I hate. She's hard to submit. Like I go way back, but I go back to like the not that far ago, but the Vanessa Demopoulos fight where she had to like fight off a bunch of submission attacks and didn't get subbed. She's actually got some submissions herself off her back, and I go back to that fight against Demopoulos, which it was Demopoulos, but she dislocated her elbow. She wanted to keep fighting in a fight that she was winning when her elbow dislocated. So I'll give her that. McKenna, she's only 23, but she's been inconsistent, which is concerning. She looked great against Kay Hansen. She looked great against Miranda Granger, but then she looked terrible against Elise Reed. So I'm not too sure, what she is at this point. And this is a really good test. If she looks good against this one, then I'm going to say the Elise Reed one was just, an outlier. If she looks bad, well, maybe this is what she's going to be. She's going to win one. She's going to lose one. She's not a great athlete. I described her in the past as a brute. She fights a lot like Raquel Pennington, very more strong than technical. And the thing about her, she's only 23. She's not even in her power years yet, so she might even become even more of a brute moving forward. She fights out of both stances. She likes to move in and out, like kind of like the in and out range, get in, try to strike, get out. She's got pretty good kicks. She throws a lot of kicks. Like I said, similar to Raquel Pennington, she wants to grind the clinch, though. She can wrestle. She will drive through her hips. She does well to cut the corner. She likes to kind of get inside and back trip while she's driving. Though she doesn't set up her entries with her striking, which is going to be an issue. And for some reason, like she completely abandoned her wrestling against Elise Reed, which was really weird. She's a weak defensive wrestler, but she is submission threat. We saw her get the Von Flue choke against Miranda Granger. So I love this matchup. Well, I shouldn't say that. Like I'd rather have them both going against veterans than facing each other. But I mean, talent-wise, I like this matchup. I'm leaning towards Vlismas. I think she's the better athlete. I think plus, based on her age compared to McKenna, she's probably in her prime, while McKenna might be a couple years away. I think Vlismas lands the better strikes from distance. I think she adds a lot of teep kicks up the middle. I think she stuffs some takedowns. I think she might even get a takedown of her own. Give me Vlismas to win a decision.
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of what you're putting down there, and I think I'm probably leaning even harder than you are here. Part of the problem is McKenna doesn't have the physicality to implement her game plan on UFC level strawweights. She's kind of tiny. And the women that she's been able to beat in the UFC, for one thing, neither of them was great. I mean, Kay Hansen, also tiny, and cut from the UFC on 3 straight losses. She just wasn't ready yet. She's 23, same as McKenna. And then Miranda Granger, I don't know if she's been cut, but also on 3 straight losses, and just not great. Elise Reed is someone that is physically stronger than I gave her credit for. Like, I kind of had written her off as, my notes on her were can be bullied, but then McKenna couldn't do it to her. And that's kind of the problem for me. I think the difference in size and just physicality, like actual muscle mass in the cage, is going to be pretty stark when they get in there. Vlismas is just a couple years older, but just has more of a grown woman body to her. Like, and I feel like I'm in no moral position to say this about a professional athlete who is plying her trade in the top promotion in the world, but McKenna kind of looks like baby fat. Like, it looks like if the UFC had an atomweight division, she could probably make 105 without too much trouble.
She'll go up and like pinch her cheeks.
But again, she's only 23. Like, she's likely to put on some muscle and grow into more power, and she could become a Pennington type, one who is able to kind of grind down bigger, more athletic women just with toughness and persistence and cardio. But thus far, she's just had a rough time trying to do it. I mean, she's 2-1, but not against the same level of competition as Vlismas. She's just kind of skipping along the very bottom rung of UFC strawweights right now. As young as she is, there's a possibility that McKenna, ends up bouncing from the UFC and coming back in a year or two, or maybe she just, goes like 3-3 or 3-4, and then suddenly turns a corner and becomes a much better fighter. Being from the UK, stardom is there for her if she starts winning. I mean, I don't know if you've heard her on the mic, but to an American ear, the Welsh accent is absolutely adorable. Like that's there for her. She could certainly become like a Molly McCann type, but this is a rough matchup for her. I think Vlismas is going to be able to keep it at a distance where she's going to have faster hands, faster kicks, better reach, more pop on her strikes. I think it's going to be a frustrating night for McKenna trying to either secure takedowns or force clinch exchanges. Give me Vlismas to kind of push McKenna around and win a real straightforward decision here. The 6-fight main card of UFC Vegas 66 opens up with a middleweight matchup between Michal Oleksiejczuk and Cody Brundage. Oleksiejczuk, the 27-year-old Pole, is 17-5 with 1 no contest overall. He is 5-3 with 1 no contest in the UFC. Worth noting that run took place primarily at light heavyweight. He is 1-0 since dropping to middleweight. That took place in his last fight. That was against Sam Alvey, so make of that what you will, but he made the weight and he picked up the win over Alvey. That was at UFC on ESPN, Santos versus Hill back in August. He will look to make it 2 in a row against Brundage. The 28-year-old from Michigan is 8-2 overall. He is 3-1 since joining the UFC as a veteran of the 2020 season of Dana White's Contender Series. He actually got knocked out by William Knight at that event, went back to LFA, picked up another win, and signed to the UFC last fall, where he debuted with a decision loss to Nick Maximov, but since then has bounced back with back-to-back first-round finishes of Dalcha Lungiambula and Tresean Gore. the most recent of those. The Gore fight was at the UFC on ESPN Rafael versus Rafael card in July. So he's going to look to make it 3 straight. He is not favored to do so. Oleksiejczuk at minus 275, one of the bigger favorites on the card. Brundage is out there at plus 230. And this is a fight that basically was conjured out of thin air. Originally, there was a middleweight matchup scheduled for this card. Albert Duraev versus Bruno Silva. Silva was forced to withdraw. Oleksiejczuk came in for Silva. Then Duraev was forced to withdraw, and Brundage came in for Duraev. So the question, kind of like the old thought experiment about the ship, if you replace all the boards and planks in the ship, is it still the same ship? Well, it's definitely not the same fight, but it's what we've got. I gave up on Michal Oleksiejczuk. It didn't even occur to me that he might drop to 185 and show some signs of life. And I know that, again, it was against the ghost of Sam Alvey. I feel like half the people in this card have wins over Sam Alvey in the last 5 years. But
yeah, including Cody McKenna.
Yeah, Cory McKenna, like, yeah, she's like, she either needs an atomweight division or she needs Sam Alvey to come back. Yeah. Oleksiejczuk, kind of like I said about Jake Matthews, I can't believe Oleksiejczuk is only 27, because it feels like he's been in the UFC for a decade, and it feels like I wrote him off like 5 years ago. And the main problem is that he seemed undersized and underpowered for 205. Like, he's a good boxer with with solid power, but he just wasn't a very big 205 pounder. And it's not like he was like yoked with tons of muscle. I mean, all along, I guess he looked like a guy who could have made 185. And one thing I like about him is he's a boxer by preference, but he's shown himself willing to take other routes to victory if they present themselves. I mean, his debut in the UFC, he beat Khalil Roundtree, and he beat him by leaning on his wrestling. It got overturned. That's his no contest. He tested positive for clomiphene, the Brock Lesnar special. But against somebody in Roundtree that he recognized could knock his face off. He kind of swallowed his boxer pride and took Khalil Roundtree down a couple times and won the fight that way. I'm interested in this fight as a better test case of what his ceiling really looks like at 185, because 205 or 185, 27 is young. He's got all the time in the world. And in Brundage, I feel like he's going against somebody where his route to victory is pretty clearly defined. Like, he should be a sharper boxer than Brundage. I mean, Brundage has good power, but his footwork, his head movement, his defense aren't nearly as composed as Oleksiejczuk's. I expect Brundage will probably try to take him down, and I'm interested to see what his takedown defense will look like at 185 against a guy in Brundage that is physically really strong, but not an especially great athlete and not a super technical wrestler. I understand why the line is what it is. I'm kind of seeing Oleksiejczuk winning at least 2 out of 3 rounds by, managing the distance, piecing him up at range, and avoiding getting taken down by Brundage, and avoiding getting hit with any just big overhand right haymaker. So give me Oleksiejczuk by decision here.
Oleksiejczuk, I think I was higher on him than you were. I like him. He's southpaw, he's a pressure striker, tons of output. He bursts forward with combinations, very aggressive. He wings his overhand left, where he kind of uses to just get into the pocket, and then he rips the body. He's got some good power. He has a lot of defensive holes. I mean, he walks into shots. That's the biggest issue. He will wrestle. He'll kind of if you start swinging, he'll drop underneath something. But he struggles to stop takedowns. I go back to the Jim Crew fight. Jim Crew took him down 8 times. And he's been submitted a few times in the past. But he does well. I forgot to mention, he does well to cut the cage and stuff. Brundage, he's not a great athlete. He likes to box. He likes to throw hard, but he's got a lot of holes when he drops his hands. He does throw a lot of haymakers, and he has some pretty good power. And we saw him knock out Tresean Gore The best part of his kicking, best part of his striking, excuse me, is his kicking. He throws a lot of kicks. He loves that, like the question mark kick. But he's very hittable. He's been hurt in the past. Despite having a wrestling background, I don't think he's a very good. He's not as good as he should be. I mean, he'll shoot, he'll get some takedowns, but we saw him get sprawled out on and just kind of sit there. I mean, Dolce Limbola was like having some success stopping his takedowns. So at one point he was like holding on to Dolce's leg and just like eating hammer fists for no reason. If he gets on top, he has a strong top game, but defensively, like Nick Maximoff I think I overrated Nick Maximov's wrestling to how easily he out wrestled Cody Brundage. Also, we've seen him in fights kind of fade late. So as far as prediction goes, if Brundage turns this into a wrestling match, he can win. But again, I don't think his wrestling's that good. He's a bigger middleweight, so like you mentioned, we've seen Olasejak get held down by bigger, stronger wrestlers. So he couldn't do that, but I don't think he does. I think he slugs it out with Olasejak, or he doesn't really have a chance to wrestle because Olasejak just brings the pressure. I think Olasejak gets past like the kicking range of Brundage and just starts landing some big shots. And I say he puts him away. I'm going to say Olasejak knocks him out in the first round.
Next up on the UFC Fight Night 216 main card, if the UFC wants to give us some kind of popcorn fight on every main card, instead of giving us unranked heavyweight slugging it out, give us unranked or borderline ranked lightweight slugging it out. It's a much better fight, and this is no exception. It is Drew Dober versus Bobby Green. Dober, the 34-year-old Nebraskan, is 25-11 with 1 no contest overall. He's 11-7 with 1 no contest in the UFC. He is on a 2-fight win streak, both of them by knockout. He stopped Terrence McKinney in the first round back in March at UFC Fight Night Santos versus Ankalaev, came back at UFC 277 in July and put down Rafael Alves in the third round with a nasty body punch. And that allowed him to bounce back from back-to-back win or back-to-back. That allowed him to bounce back from back-to-back losses to Islam Makhachev and Brad Riddell. He will look to make it 3 in a row at the expense of Green. The 36-year-old Californian is 29-13-1 overall. He's 10-8-1 in the UFC. He lost his last time out, stepped up on short notice to take on now lightweight champ Islam Makhachev in the headliner of UFC Fight Night 202 in February. He got predictably taken down and pounded out on the ground in the first round. Prior to that, he had a pair of back-to-back impressive-looking wins over Nasrat Haqparast and Al Iaquinta. Odds here, fairly close, but Dober's a slight to moderate favorite. He's minus 155, Green around plus 135. Keith, interestingly, I mean, I wasn't picking Green to beat Makhachev in February. Nobody was picking Green to beat Makhachev in February. I mean, he took it on short notice. Makhachev is a terrible matchup for everybody. But in my mind, it doesn't change the idea that Green might have turned a bit of a corner in the last year and a half or so. And that doesn't mean I think he's going to settle in as a reliable top 10 fighter. I mean, he's basically lost to all the top 10 fighters he's fought. His last 3 losses in the UFC: Islam Makhachev, Rafael Fiziev, Thiago Moises. Your champ, a solid top 10 fighter, and in Moises, a guy that was a solid top 10 fighter at the time, and may still be again. He's quite a bit younger than Green. And other than that, Green has beaten most everybody else. He's not Michael Johnson. It's not like he just finds terrible ways to lose.
No, he's good.
It's a terrible. Yeah, he's a good fighter, but he does have that Michael Johnson or that kind of 2014 Jorge Masvidal thing where he wouldn't push the action enough. He would leave rounds closer than they needed to be, and always seemed to be at risk of just kind of either just being in a terrible fight or dropping an iffy decision or getting a draw against Lando Venata. He seemed to have a little more of a sense of urgency in the Iaquinta and Haqparast fights. I'm interested to see what that looks like here against Dober, because his best route to victory against Dober isn't to just step on the gas on the feet. It's probably to take Dober down. Green's
Absolutely.
a good wrestler. He's a former college wrestler. His takedowns are underrated, and they're underrated because we don't see them often enough. But that also, in a sneaky way, makes them more effective because they're unexpected when they come. And we've talked about it before. Dober, I mean, I made the joke like 2 years ago, and I bring it up every time. Like, he looks wrestling. He's
it's all right. Think about it. Like Dave Chappelle goes on tour, he tells the same jokes for 50 different cities, so it's good, man. You get it like at least now 30 more times.
I got my material, you know.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, things are growing here. There are probably people watching this that didn't watch this preview, Drew Dober's last fight, let alone like in early 2020. But you know, you show me a stocky blonde guy with cauliflower ear from Nebraska, I'm gonna say, oh, I bet that dude can fucking wrestle. That ain't Drew Dober. You know, Dober is an explosive kickboxer with. It used to be terrible takedown defense. It's now merely a weakness instead of like the exhaust port in the Death Star, but it's still a weakness. And I'm guessing here, like I'm betting on the new Bobby Green to show up, and if Green, Green will probably do fine if he boxes with him. You know, he has his quirks on the feet. You know, keeps his hands low, likes to rely on head movement to slip punches. You know, got good hand speed, solid power. He's not usually like he's not a one-shot knockout artist, but good power. You know, like you see what he did to Al Iaquinta, where as soon as they started exchanging, there was a difference when he landed versus when Iaquinta landed. And Iaquinta has been one of the better boxers in the division for a while. But if Green is smart enough to mix in takedowns or even just take Dober down in the first round and give him something to think about for the rest of the fight, I think it'll make it that much easier for him. And I'm picking him to do so. Give me Bobby Green in the mild to moderate upset here in a decision over Dober, where Green is building and starting to roll down on downhill on Dober as the fight wears along, where like he wins this thing going away, and by the third round it's looking like a little bit of a rout.
All right. Yeah, Bobby Green, I don't know. I'm still on the fence on him. He's definitely a good boxer. He can fight out of both stances. You mentioned he drops his hands, but he also like hangs his hands low, so he kind of throws from weird angles. He has that like really good up jab where everything kind of builds off of that jab. He does have the rare ability to land while backing up. But that's because he kind of, the way he backs up, he kind of switches side to side each time, so he can kind of land. I like that he's added, and this is probably my favorite thing he's added recently, is that he throws elbows when they get inside. So he gets in the pocket and he starts changing things to elbows, which obviously can cut his opponent, also can hurt his opponent. I'm still a little concerned on that cruising, like that lack of urgency, and is like not willing to match output. Yes, he has upped it a lot, but his defensive style, the slipping shots, rolling with punches, I think it always looks so bad to judges. Again, his last couple of fights, he hasn't shown that, and I kind of hope that's gone for good. He doesn't get hurt often, so that's a big thing with rolling with punches and deflecting. But it's still a concern because you can give away rounds to guys that get better than. He's a very good defensive wrestler. He does really well if you take him down to get back to his feet. Now again, somebody like, yeah, how they look against Makhachev. Well, yeah, he doesn't have everybody, like, you know what I mean, like, but he actually isn't. I agree with what you said. You called him an underrated offensive wrestler for two reasons. One, as you mentioned, he doesn't go for it often, so it surprised you. But then on the flip side, when you look at his numbers, he actually gets more takedowns than you think he does. So it's good that we don't even think about him going for takedowns, and he does. So that's a good way to disguise it. Now, Drew Dober, he's a southpaw. You mentioned it. He's a kickboxer. He marches down his foe with like pressure, counter striking, very controlled. He's really been picking his shots well, where he's unloading power shots when the moment, the openings are there. He also has a very like slip and rip style, draws out attacks well with feints. I love his body shots. I mean, he battered Rafael Alves in his last fight with body shots. He's a true knockout artist. I mean, he keeps his base underneath him, and what so he generates a lot of powerhouse. He's a bricked up dude. Like you mentioned, being from Nebraska, he looks like a guy that just throws hay barrels all day long and rattles cows and shit and whatever people in Nebraska, whatever the guys in Nebraska do. But
they wrestle.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, he's probably wrestled. He just hasn't wrestled like other people. He's wrestled cows and goats and shit. He constantly sets up his straight shots with his footwork. His footwork really good. And it's about like winning the center line, lining up his shots straight down the pipe. He can chase the perfect shot sometimes, and instead of like just constantly throwing hard instead of just flowing, which is kind of funny because I said he's been picking his shots better. But that's like what if I keep talking about Bobby Green and cruising, I guess I can put that out there. That sometimes Dober chases the KO. I love his kicks though. He's got hard body kicks. He's a terrible defensive. I mean, his offensive wrestling, he wouldn't go for a takedown. His defense wrestling is terrible. I mean, he's it's not Bryan Barberino bad, but it's like the next tier down. If we had like tiers of, Jose Aldo being the highest tier, Bryan Barberino being the worst tier, Drew Dober is the tier above that. This really could be an easy win for Bobby.
We got to throw like 2022 Darren Till into that pile now.
Oh, I know. Jesus Christ. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. This could be an easy fight for Bobby Green if Bobby Green decides, okay, hey, I wrestled in college. I'm a much better wrestler than this guy from Nebraska. Let me wrestle. And he might like even go for a takedown. I just don't think he'll do it enough. I think he's going to feel Dober's power, and that'll make him shoot a little bit. But all in all, like Bobby Green always talks about, he wants to slang and bang, and Dober's the guy that do it to him. And I don't know if Bobby Green matches Dober's output. I don't know if Bobby Green has Dober's power either.
Probably not.
So I think Dober hurts him. I think Dober beats him with volume. I really wanted to pick Dober to knock out Green, but Green, the way he rolls, the way he defends, it's so hard. Plus, he hasn't been hurt since the Dustin Poirier fight like forever ago. So I'll say Dober wins the decision.
There you go. Little bit of dissension on the main card. We head now to the featherweight division for a frankly unlikely sounding matchup. If you'd asked anybody 5 years ago whether these two gentlemen would be in the UFC at all, let alone on a main card, but here they are, and well deserved. It is Alex Caceres versus Julian Erosa. Caceres, the 34-year-old Floridian training out of Arizona, is 19-13 with 1 no contest overall. He is 14-11 since joining the UFC out of the 12th season of The Ultimate Fighter. Whew. He lost his last time out. It was a unanimous decision against Sadiq Youssef back in March at UFC Fight Night, Santos versus Ankalaev. But that put the brakes on a 5-fight win streak for Caceres. A streak that saw him get really to the cusp of the rankings in one of the hardest divisions in the UFC to approach the rankings. But he was turned back by unanimous decision. He's going to look to get back on track here against the even unlikelier success story, Erosa. The 33-year-old Washington State native is 28-9 overall. He is 6-5 across 3 different stints in the UFC. Same as my jokes, I have my trivia pieces that I, will probably repeat every time we do a preview. But he was the first fighter to enter the UFC 3 different times, 3 different ways. He joined out of the 22nd season of The Ultimate Fighter, was cut. He joined again out of the 2nd season of Dana White's Contender Series, was once again cut, came back to the UFC as a COVID-19 late replacement, and 3rd time was the charm. I mentioned that he is 6-5 in the UFC. He is 5-1 since coming back. Aside from a loss to Sung Woo Choi, he has won all of his fights since being back and has looked like, well, I won't say he's looked like a different fighter. He's looked like a much, much better version of the same fighter, and he may just be one of those fighters that turns a corner in their 30s. He is on a 3-fight win streak since the Choi loss, those being a 3rd-round submission of Charles Jourdain last September, a split decision win over Steven Peterson in February, and most recently a unanimous decision over Hakeem Dawodu at UFC 279 in September. So he's going to look to make it 4 in a row here. He is a moderate favorite to do so. He's minus 190, Caceres plus 160. Keith, I mean, Julian Erosa is right up there for me with Chris Curtis in the list of fighters I did not expect to see in the UFC, or did not expect to see back in the UFC experiencing success. I mean, I mentioned that Caceres was, you know, he was on a 5-fight win streak before he lost to Sadiq Yusuff, but that was against like fairly low level opposition, if we're being honest. Julian Erosa, like, if he wins convincingly over Caceres this weekend, he'll be on my watch list to enter the featherweight like bubble rankings for us, you know, that 11 through 15 range. Like, Charles Jourdain and Hakeem Dawodu are solid wins, and getting sparked by Sung Woo Choi, I mean, it's not a great look, but that's something that's probably going to happen to Julian Erosa from time to time for as long as he's in the UFC. Like, I hesitate to call him a glass cannon, but I've said before that he is an equal opportunity distributor of highlights to his own reel and to other people's reels. Because, like I said, he's not the same fight. Not recently. Like, recently it's been more his own, but you know, his first two stints in the UFC, he went 1-4 and just had some ugly looks. He got like iced by Julio Arce with a head kick. He was super aggro. Like, obviously he has unmatched physical tools. He's like super tall for the division, and not tall and skinny, but like he's just a huge guy for the division, 6'1" with long arms and legs, and he uses them effectively in striking as well as grappling. But on the offensive side, he's always going to have some defensive liabilities. He's still super hittable. While he's an aggressive grappler who is very opportunistic, he can be taken advantage of on the ground as well. But none of those things really point to easy avenues to victory for Alex Caceres. Caceres' game is kind of deceptive. Like, coming out of Tough 12, where, I mean, he was a child. He was like 20 years old or 21 years old in the Tough House. But, you know, he had like the Bruce Leroy nickname and like the afro with like the afro pick in it, and walked out in a white gi. So you're expecting a certain type of fighter, but really his best attribute is his grappling. He's not a lockdown like top position grappler. He's an opportunistic scramble heavy grappler, and that's, you know, that's the best of what he has to offer. But being a sticky grappler against Erosa, I mean, it offers a fairly narrow avenue to victory for him. And if this fight remains on the feet, Erosa's probably gonna piece him up, and with greater power. Like, Erosa's capable of being hit and hurt on the feet. Obviously, it's happened a ton of times, but Caceres isn't a real power hitter. He's going to give up a ton of height and reach to Erosa. So Erosa's like problems of having his chin way up in the air and backing straight up aren't going to tell on him. This is about as favorable a matchup as you could find for Erosa in this general realm of like the featherweight division in the UFC. And I expect that it's gonna be a showcase for him. Give me Julian Erosa. I'm thinking second round finish. It could be a club and sub type thing. He could just completely spark him on the feet. But give me submission. I'm gonna say he hurts him on the feet, and Caceres like just desperation shoots right into another Bravo choke or something, or gets his back taken. Give me Erosa by second round submission, and it won't be fight of the night, but something that's likely to pick up a performance of the night for Erosa and continue his completely breakout year of 2022. The other thing you need to know about Erosa is he's beaten Steven Peterson and Hakeem Dawodu this year, and he won at least one fight of the night, and both of those guys missed weight. So we picked up part of their check and one of their bonus checks. I mean, he might be the second highest paid featherweight in the world this year after Brendan Loughnane.
I'm hoping Alex Volkanovski might get paid more than, but who knows?
Yeah. But I bet Max Holloway wasn't. He only fought once this year.
Yeah. And he didn't even win. I know he's not really a fight and win bonus guy, but still. Yeah, this is an intriguing fight, and I mean, Alex Caceres, we know where he is at this point in his career. I mean, he's the ultimate veteran. He's seen everything. He's a southpaw that moves really well, good vision, crisp jab. Kind of always been a awkward, herky jerky, kind of weird, unorthodox style where he lands punches in unorthodox positions. He has underrated power. I think he did because of his physique. You know, like he's a tall, lengthy. Not he doesn't get credit for how hard he can hit. He can hit a lot of kicks. He's a weird grappler, very funky style grappling where it's more about scrambles. But because of that, he puts himself in some bad positions. He'll look great because of that style too. He'll look great one fight and then look terrible in another fight. Julian Rosa, yeah, he's turned into our kind of guy. He's a huge guy who's long and lengthy. He's got a 76-inch reach, constantly switching stances. Great output. I shouldn't say good, great output. He doesn't stop working. We've seen him just outwork and beat good guys with his pressure. Sean Woodson, Charles Jourdain, Hakeem Dawodu. I mean, that's three good fighters that he just beat, but just outworking them. He looked really good against Dawodu, one of the best wins of his career. Landed a lot of good power shots, hurt him a couple times on the feet. He can fight on the outside, long, rangy, punches, rangy kicks, great tip kicks, but he can also fight on the inside. And he's insanely left. Like, he's a guy who will get, like you mentioned, he'll give highlights, or he'll get highlights or give highlights. Yeah, that's because he's willing to brawl, which is ironic because he's not a huge power puncher, but he trusts his chin. Again, should he? He keeps his chin high, and he's been knocked out like 5 times in his career. So, we might catch up to him eventually, where everything could all fall. But the one good thing about him is he can still go back to his wrestling. He's a good offensive wrestler, bad defensive wrestler, and that's because he'll, very similar to Alex Caceres, he'll jump on guillotines. He'll kind of try to create scramble, but he can get some subs. Sometimes he'll look for subs instead of scrambles, which I don't like. But you look at his fight against Dawodu, he took Dawodu's back a couple times, and ultimately he's going to go hard all 15 minutes. Cardio is a weapon to him. He's going to beat you, break you with his cardio. I'm with you, man. I like Arosa here. I think he forces Caceres on his back foot the entire fight. I think he presses the action. I think he beats him with volumes. I think he gets takedowns, or when the scrambles ensue, he's getting the better of the scrambles. Caceres is so tough to put away, so I don't think he'll do that. So give me Arosa by decision.
Third from the top at UFC Vegas 66 is a men's flyweight matchup between Amir Albazi and Alessandro Costa. Albazi, the 29-year-old Iraq-born Swedish citizen training out of the UK, is 15-1 overall. He is 3-0 since joining the UFC out of Brave CF. He has wins over Malcolm Gordon, Jalga Shumagulov, and most recently, back in August at UFC 278, Francisco Figueiredo, whom he choked out in the first round. He's going to look to make it 4 in a row in the UFC, 5 in a row overall. The UFC had been trying to book him into a de facto top 5 matchup. They had him booked against Alex Perez. Alex Perez fell off the card. Then it was Brandon Royval. Royval was also forced to withdraw. Third option is Costa. The 26-year-old Brazilian is 12-2 overall. This will be his UFC debut. He fought on the Contender Series. He was in the first episode of the 2022 season where he beat Andres Luna by split decision. He was not signed. If you remember, that was the episode where Dana White basically cut a promo on everybody, literally just kind of dropped the mic and walked off, and only Joe Pyfer was signed from that episode. So Costa went back, won one more fight in Brazil, knocked out somebody in like 10 seconds, and here he gets the short notice call. Obviously, for Albazi to step from Alex Perez to Brandon Royval to a debuting guy who barely won on the Contender Series is a step in one direction. From Costa to step from icing a sub 500 fighter in 10 seconds to fighting Amir Albazi is a step in the other direction. And unsurprisingly, Albazi is pretty easily the biggest favorite on the card. He's minus 410 right now. Costa plus 330. Keith, I mean, I had a little built-in tape study on Costa because I was on Sherdog's play-by-play for that episode of the Contender Series. I'll be frank, he's a guy that might have sticking power in the UFC, and honestly, if he'd been on any other episode of the Contender Series that season, he probably would have been signed immediately. I mean, the UFC signed every single winner from the season after that episode, and 2 or 3 of the losers. But I sure didn't see anything that would lead me to believe he's going to beat Amir Albazi. Albazi, by the eyeball test, looks like a future title contender. The UFC clearly thinks the same, considering they were trying to book him against top 5 fighters on the back of wins over like Jaga Shumagalov and Francisco Figueiredo. They clearly can see what they have in the guy. And on top of, being a very, very good fighter who gets a ton of finishes, he has a kind of a big oversized personality that's equally rare at flyweight. I mean, what men's flyweight can always use is people who can finish fights and people with, a little bit of personality. And unlike, your Henry Cejudo types, he seemed to have just more of a natural charisma. It feels a lot more like a Brandon Moreno type thing where there's just a confidence and a joy in fighting that just that comes off of him. Like, tell me, if you see any serious upset potential here, or this is just another stepping stone on Albazi's way towards the title picture.
Yeah, I mean, Albazi looks incredible. I mean, he's well-rounded. He's super sharp striker, technically sound, very accurate. I love his jab, very busy jab. Does well to really bounce himself off the center line. So he's always kind of like sidestepping and cutting angles. So it's kind of hard to pick up his tacks and reads. I love that he works himself into range and then just unloads hard shots when they're available. He keeps his distance if he wants with his footwork, with his check left hook. He's got some hard calf kicks. He's a good wrestler. Good timing on his reactionary double if you kind of pressure him or you just kind of open up with too big of a shot so you can duck under. He can also get inside and he had some nice clinch takedowns in his last fight. He's got a really good top smother and top game. I like that he advanced his position. He has some slick back takes. He's got 8 career subs. I mean, he submitted Francisco Figueiredo in his last fight, which that says a lot. I mean, that's a good, not the right Figueiredo brother, but still, that's a good submission. And I mean, what I like is that I've seen him get submissions on top and bottom. Costa, I think Costa is a decent addition to the the flyweight division, which always needs bodies. He's a short, stocky, very jacked kind of guy, but he's a little lumbering on his feet, a little flat-footed until he explodes. Like when he gets in the pocket, he explodes. He's a pocket boxer who's a power puncher. He's got a lot of power. I mean, his last fight, he starts the guy in like 10 seconds. He had times on the Contender Series where he was dropping the guy. He throws a lot of hard hooks, but he can be trigger shy, not just on that fight in the Contender Series, but other fights on the regional scene. He was a little bit of a slow starter. He's got hard kicks. He doesn't check leg kicks. He's very like boxing style where he's very heavy on his front foot, so that can be an issue. He will grapple, and he's a good submission grappler. He's got 6 subs in his career, but this is a huge step up in competition. And, I mean, like I said, I think Costa's a good addition to the UFC. I don't know if he's a title contender like Albazi could be. I really see Costa only having one chance in this fight, and that's just to land a big power shot, and that's kind of what his game is. Or maybe catch a submission in a scramble. Even that would surprise me. Albazi's too fast for him, too tactical. He's a better striker. I don't know if he gets to finish, but I expect like a blowout victory. Give me Albazi like maybe even a 10-8 round in there. So give me Albazi like 30-26 scorecard. Yeah,
I'm in complete agreement here, and I could actually see Albazi getting the finish, in part because it's a huge mismatch, but also because Costa is stepping up on short notice. So if things like push to the second, to the third round, that's only going to favor Albazi, who at least has been in camp, this whole time. I agree that Costa, like, he hits with a good amount of power. he has a ton of submissions, but they were executed on really low-level fighters. Like, you scan up his record on the regional scene, there are a lot of, like, 0-0 fighters or fighters with, you know, sub-500 records. Again, he beat a guy that was, like, 3-5 in his very last fight back in October after the Contender Series. And to step from that to Amir Albazi, it's going to be, like, whiplash-inducing, like, levels of acceleration. And even on the Contender Series, like, yeah, he beat Luna, but he threw so little volume that the first 2 rounds were like really difficult to score, and that's against a low-level fighter. If he stands around like throwing low volume against Albazi, he's just going to get overwhelmed, and that's kind of what I'm picking here. I think Albazi's going to hurt him bad on the feet. Albazi will be able to take him down when he wants to, and even though like Costa by the numbers is a good submission grappler, Albazi's going to be much better and much sharper there. Give me Amir Albazi by second round. I'm going to say TKO on the ground, like takes him down and either subs him or pounds him out, but I'll go with TKO. That brings us to the co-main event, a scheduled 155-pound contenders fight between Arman Tsarukyan and Damir Ismagulov. Tsarukyan, the 26-year-old Russian of Armenian descent, is 18-3 overall. He's 5-2 in the UFC. He lost his debut to Islam Makhachev back in 2019. He lost to Mateusz Gamrot in his most recent appearance back in June in the headliner of UFC on ESPN 38. And in between are sandwiched 5 straight wins over Olivier Aubin-Mercier, David Ramos, Matt Frevola, Christos Yagos, and Yoel Alvarez. Tsarukyan will look to get back to winning ways against Ismagulov. The 31-year-old from Kazakhstan is 24-1 overall. He is 5-0 since joining the UFC as a former M1 global lightweight champ. He is on a 19-fight win streak overall. He fought most recently back in June, taking a split decision over Guram Kutateladze on the UFC on ESPN Cater versus Emmett card. Prior to that, he had unanimous decision wins over Rafael Alves and Thiago Moises. As I mentioned, he has won 19 fights in a row. Really, his only serious rival over the past half decade has been the scale. He's only had 3 appearances in the last 3 years, in part because last October 30th, the Halloween weekend card, he blew weight by 7.5 pounds, which caused his fight to be canceled entirely. He has a couple of weight misses earlier in his career outside of the UFC, so really the only thing that's been able to slow this man down are those numbers on the scale. Interestingly, for a man who, again, will be going for his 20th straight win, he is not the favorite. Tsarukyan minus 155, Ismagulov plus 135. Keith, when the bettors and the odds makers are saying something is going to happen that hasn't happened, you know, in a man's last 19 fights, you kind of perk up.
Yeah.
I love this fight, man.
Yeah, so do I. I mean, I can't believe it's not a pick'em.
It should be close to a pick'em. I mean, I'm guessing that that's due in part to the out of sight, out of mind thing. Like Tsarukyan has been much more active in the last couple years. I mean, Tsarukyan has 7 fights in the time that Ismagulov has 3.
Yeah, not good.
Like Tsarukyan's entire UFC run has taken place over the same time as the Moises, Alves, and Kutateladze fights for Ismagulov.
Yeah.
Ismagulov is huge. Yeah. He is,
especially when he misses weight.
Well, yeah, especially when he misses weight. Especially when he misses weight by more than halfway to the next weight division. He's not a huge bricked up guy, but he's over 6 feet tall and he's got muscle on his frame. And I mean, this is a guy who was blowing weight and fighting at like 163-pound catch weights when he was in his mid-20s. He's now in his early 30s. It's not going to get easier. You kind of wonder if he had moved up to welterweight and just been able to fight more regularly, if he'd be further along. Because as he is,
I think he would be.
If he could at any point fight twice in a calendar year, he'd probably be in the title picture. Having said that, I think the Express is going to stop at some point here. On the regional scene, he was a knockout machine. Just he was younger. He was fighting a lower level of competition. In practice at the UFC level with what must be a massive and draining weight cut, he is an ultra grindy guy. His fights are not appointment viewing. They have all been either slow-paced kickboxing matches or slow-paced wrestling matches. His fight with Guram Kutateladze, well, for one thing, you and I both think Kutateladze has like top 10 upside as well.
Oh yeah, he's good.
He Ismagulov barely won that fight.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it should be a pick 'em as well, but I'm leaning Sarukian here. He's the opposite of Ismagulov. He's this little, short, bricked up guy. He's basically lightweight Ilia Topuria. And like it's not the exact same skill set, but some of the same vibe, where he is a very capable wrestler and grappler. I mean, his fight with Mateusz Gamrot was it's on my fight of the year list. It's and just 5 rounds of just fantastic wrestling and grappling. And it showed Sarukian very much holding his own against a much taller, longer limbed, taller, bigger, longer limbed, good wrestler and grappler in Gamrot, that could be a bit of a preview of what it will look like if Sarukian and Ismagulov hit the ground. Sarukian is also a pretty diverse striker with a ton of power. I mean, like underrated power. He's got that, kind of like Ilia Topuria type power, where just things like stay tight. I say that after Topuria like overswung on half his punches last week, but like when he's not like so excited that he's coming out of his own skin, things normally stay real tight, and he just has that power that comes from like nice tight arcs on everything. I'm leaning Sarukian here, and I think hopefully it'll be more of an arm on Sarukian fight than a Damir Ismagulov fight, because if Ismagulov wins, he'll be winning as a nullifier. He'll be able to keep Sarukian on the end of his punches and manage the range, or if they go to the ground, it'll be Ismagulov avoiding the kind of scramble Sarukian wants in favor of just much more deliberate positional chess on the ground. I always love when announcers call something a chess match on the ground, because guess what? Chess isn't fun to watch in real time.
No.
But I'm leaning towards this being more of a Sarukian fight than an Ismagulov fight. I'd feel even more so about it if it were a 5-rounder. But even in 3 rounds, I think Sarukian's pace is going to really tax Ismagulov. He's not very active. He has a massive weight cut. And this might be the fight. I mean, if this snaps the 19-fight win streak for Ismagulov, this might be the fight that makes him go, okay, screw it, I'm a welterweight, and has him move up, where he would do just fine and maybe be a little more exciting to watch. But I'm calling for Sarukian to get back on track here in by decision in a fight that is entertaining despite his opponent's best efforts. Give me Sarukian by decision.
Yeah, and hopefully we just have this fight happen in general, because being that Ismagulov is so inactive, I mean, I wouldn't surprise he pulls out this week. But besides that, he could always miss weight and ruin a good thing. But if they do throw down, I mean, this is a fantastic fight. I mean, it's the best fight on the card. Sarukian's 26 years old, so he's kind of at that age where he's starting to enter his prime. He's a great athlete. He's well-rounded, tight. You mentioned tight boxing, fast hands, very fluid with his hands, just flows well, good footwork, good head movement, very good at slipping shots and staying in range to counter with his own power shots. I love that he works the body. Despite being a smaller, well, I shouldn't say he's not small, he's short, even he's stacked. I mean, he's a jacked up dude, but despite being short, he's got some good power in both of his hands, and we saw him crush Christoph Giagos with a shot. He'll throw some spinning attacks, which I'm not crazy about, because kind of just in the flow of a fight kind of thing. I like the hard body kicks he was landing on Gamrot, hard calf kicks. He's a great wrestler, great timing, great at like blazing fast entries and creating scrambles. He can blast through the hips, or he can just kind of drop underneath something. Good. He can get inside and get some like foot sweeps. He likes that. He kind of got a little bit of judo in him. hits the ground. He's a submission threat. He's hard to sub. I mean, we saw him go against Davi Hamos and grapple with an Abu Dhabi champion and not get submitted. So he's really good. He did fade a little bit in that Gamrot fight, and that was the difference in the fight. But let's be honest, that was it was a 25-minute fight, but also that was an insanely paced fight, which that's not how Ismagulov fights. He doesn't fight at a pace like that. And if he does, he's in big trouble.
Yeah.
Ismagulov, he's well-rounded. He's long, he's lengthy, he's massive. He makes some flaws with it. He does stand, he stands as tall as he is. I mean, he's stands up too tall for my liking. Very defensive minded, keeps a high guard, kind of tough to get around his defenses. I give him more credit for his volume than you do. I wouldn't categorize him as a high volume guy, but I wouldn't say he's low volume. I think he's like steady paced, but he's got quick hands. He's accurate. They're short, no tells, no wind up, and despite that, he has serious power. You talked about his power on the regional scene before the UFC. He's got an elite jab. We saw that. I mean, Kuda Lotzley couldn't get by his jab. That was the difference in the fight. Hard calf kicks. He will wrestle a little, but what I like about him is he blends his wrestling and his takedown attacks really well. He sets up his takedowns. He likes to throw some strikes and then drop down in a snatch single and run the pipe. But when I think about his wrestling, I think more about the strong takedown defense. He uses his defensive wrestling to kind of keep it on the feet. More of a sprawl and brawl type guy. But the biggest concern, and besides the weight cut, is he did tire out. Go back to the Rafael's fight. That was a fight that he was fading out late. Even Kudalaze in a fight that wasn't the highest pace fight, he was slowing down a little bit. I think this is an amazing fight. If it went 5 rounds, I would feel better about Tsarukyan because I've seen him fight deeper into fights. I don't like this line. I think it should be closer to pick him just because of the size disparity, the jab. If Tsarukyan fights the fight that Ismagulov wants, Ismagulov could win that fight all day. If he wants to move around, just kind of darting in and out of range and just try to kickbox with Ismagulov, Ismagulov's going to I shouldn't say piece him out, but he could win that fight. But that said, Tsarukyan could also have a lot of success in the striking offensively. So to me, both guys can have success offensively with striking. Well, what about the offensive grappling? Who would have the advantage there? And I'd be surprised if Ismagulov has big success in the offensive grappling. I wouldn't be surprised if Tsarukyan has success in the grappling. I think his takedowns might be a little harder to get based on the size difference. Getting inside and high crotching, it might be a little harder. But if he has the right mentality of it's more of not necessarily getting the takedown, but just getting him to work in positions, that's where I really think Tsarukyan can kind of run away with it. And we know he can fight hard all 15 minutes of that fight. So that said, I'm with you. I'm leaning towards Tsarukyan, but again, not at those odds that they're saying. I think it should be pretty much a pick 'em.
And are you thinking Tsarukyan by decision?
Oh, sorry, Tsarukyan by decision. Yeah.
Awesome. With that, we come to the main event of UFC Vegas 66, the final UFC bout of 2022. The honor goes to Jared Cannonier and Sean Strickland, a pair of gentlemen that, again, if things had gone a little differently, this might have been a pay-per-view headliner or co-headliner last week for the UFC middleweight title. Cannonier, the 38-year-old Alaskan by way of Arizona, is 15-6 overall. He's 8-6 in the UFC. That's a somewhat pedestrian-sounding number until you realize that he's 5-2 since dropping to middleweight. This is a man who entered the UFC as a heavyweight, dropped to light heavyweight, and finally made the cut to middleweight, where he seems to have found his home, considering that he's 5-2, and the only two people he's lost to are Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker. He fought last, of course, against Adesanya. That was in the headliner of UFC 276, where he came up short in a 5-round decision in his attempt to take the middleweight title. He will look to stay in the title picture here against Strickland, who last fought on that same night against your now champ, Alex Pereira, in a title eliminator. Strickland, the 31-year-old Californian, is 25-4 overall. He's 12-4 in the UFC, but he started as a welterweight. He is 5-1 since moving up past the welterweight division. He's fought at middleweight and some catchweights. He came into the Pereira fight on a 6-fight win streak, including wins over fringe contenders like Uriah Hall and actual contenders like Jack Hermanson, but got knocked out in the middle of the first round by Alex Pereira. So he also is looking to regain some momentum, looking to reaffirm himself as a factor in the title picture going forward. And he is the slightest of favorites to get it done. Strickland is -115, Cannonier +100, even money as the slight underdog. Keith, Cannonier, 38 years old, and on some level, he seems to be fighting the best he ever has. I mean, I read off his record. He started in the UFC as basically a 500 fighter or a sub 500 fighter, fighting above his ideal weight class, and since cutting to 185, he's been a solid top 10, if not top 5 contender, and he doesn't seem to show any sign of slipping. But obviously, it's got to happen sooner or later. And to me, at least, there's something that felt like kind of his last gasp or his high watermark at UFC 276. Like, okay, he made it to a title shot, and maybe that's the last time we see him in one. Whereas Strickland, 31, and the loss to Pereira, I know that Strickland like gives off this persona of, self-professed sociopath who appears to like not give a shit about anything, but that he is sitting in his apartment with his like duct taped TV and no furniture and kicking himself in the ass about the Pereira fight. Like it seemed to me to be such a failure of like either game planning or fight IQ, that he seemed to make no real effort to bring this fight to the ground against the best striker in the division with a completely unproven and probably deficient ground game, and instead chose to hang out on the feet and got his lunch handed to him. On some level, Strickland has, because if Strickland had come out throwing 2 jabs and then shot a double leg and got knocked out in the first round anyway, at least there'd be less to regret about it. Yeah,
it should have his. Yeah, when you fight a game plan you shouldn't, and then pay for it, you don't get yourself to blame on that.
Yeah. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one. Okay. But with Cannonier like showing no real signs of physical slippage, like he's still just fast, extremely powerful punches and kicks, like especially his kicks. He's not huge for the division. I mean, he's got muscles on his muscles, but he's not tall. He doesn't have great reach.
Like but he's a middleweight. He's not like a big middleweight. He's not a small middleweight. He's just
Yeah. He's just, he's a
which is funny because he used to fight at heavyweight. But yeah.
He used to fight at heavyweight, and he was an undersized heavyweight. I mean, dude, he fought Sean Jordan. Like Sean Jordan probably outweighed him by 45 pounds in the cage.
Yeah, and it was like a short time at heavyweight, and he really transformed his body. I mean, you look at the pictures of him at heavyweight compared to middleweight, you wouldn't even know it's the same person.
Yeah, you wouldn't know it's the same person. I mean, he looks like he's just carved out of marble.
Yeah.
But for Strickland, it's a reduced version to me of the same dynamic he came up against in the Pereira fight. Yeah, there's a chance he could outstrike Cannonier. Like, Strickland has one of the best jabs in the division, and he's one of those guys that's, it's, we've said this a few times, there are people for whom the jab is a tool, and there are people for whom the jab is a weapon, where it's not just finding range and or discouraging, the opponent from coming in, but it's actually doing damage, it's cutting people up, it's changing the course of a fight. I mean, he beat Jack Hermanson basically with his jab. Yeah. I'm sorry, what was that?
I said, Jairzinho Rozenstruik is one of those guys. Oh, you throw a jab to hurt someone.
Jairzinho Rozenstruik, just recruited someone to the Philadelphia Police Department with his jab. So, I mean...
Back to third shift you go.
Yeah. There's every chance that Strickland could win this fight if both of them just treat it as a kickboxing match. Strickland's going to probably have a little bit of reach. He does well when he has the reach advantage. He generally has a very good chin. So if Cannonier does manage to bounce into range and land one of his like massive shots, there's a chance that like Strickland is able to survive it. But again, Strickland is an underratedly good wrestler. That remains Cannonier's Achilles heel, and it's Cannonier is his takedown defense is I'd say it's average to below average, but like his bottom game and his get up game like is still a problem to me. It was impressive that he managed to beat Brunson the way he did. That indicated to me that he might have like turned a corner there, but I don't expect him to have like really reinvented his game at this point. So it's down to whether Strickland is going to fight to his best advantage here. And I can't believe I'm betting against Sean Strickland doing the stupid thing. But like as much of a bizarre kind of psycho as he presents himself as outside the cage, he's generally been a pretty smart fighter inside of it. It's why the Pereira fight was such a weird outlier and like felt like such an aberration. So I'm banking on Strickland being willing to mix it up with Cannonier on the feet, but using the takedown, or at least the threat of the takedown, to blunt Cannonier's offense, maybe discourage Cannonier's kicks. Like, I mean, if he catches one of Cannonier's first 2 or 3 kicks and uses it to drive him down to the ground and holds him down there for 2.5 minutes and elbows him a couple of times, gives Cannonier something to think about for the next 4.5 rounds, that goes a long way towards winning him this fight. And I am cautiously betting on him to do so. So give me a Strickland by decision here in a pretty good fight that will, again, keep him not too far down Sean Shelby's phone list that we would be talking about on the recap. If we were having one. Strickland by decision for me. Yeah,
and he's a guy that he can talk himself into things too because of his press conference, his interviews. You either gonna love it, you're gonna hate it, whatever you're gonna do, you're still gonna listen to it no matter what. You see Sean Strickland, interview, you're gonna click it.
I mean, I love, obviously, the trash talk. I enjoy it. I don't enjoy it like as much as some people, but I'm a sucker for a good one-liner. And it's a shame that Strickland didn't beat Pereira, because the stuff he was throwing at Izzy all that week was just killing me. When he said to Adesanya, your Pornhub is full of cartoons. There's no way I'm going to let a guy that jacks off to cartoons kick my ass. Because Adesanya is very famously into like anime, which, crosses over into like hentai, which is, the pornographic like side of that. That killed me, dude. Okay. Oh my goodness.
I didn't know about that. Even if I did, I wouldn't admit that I knew about that. This is it's weird because the middleweight division is wide open, but this fight, as of right now that might change, and Strickland at this week media day could get a lot more buzz going about it. But being that we've seen both guys their last fight lose, both, and it wasn't even like one of these losses where it was a good performance in the loss. One guy got knocked out cold, the other guy just got pointed and refused to do anything.
Like Adesanya versus Cannonier was like a Valentina Shevchenko title defense where you feel like the loser almost felt like they should get a medal just for surviving.
Yeah, a little bit. And almost like he was fighting that way too, which is the worst thing. Like it's one of those, and I think of like when Anderson Silva was a champion, he had fights like that where the guy's just, okay, I'm going out there to not get knocked out. And that's how I really felt like Cannonier for Israel Adesanya. That's not the way you can fight now. It's kind of I want him to fight differently since that fight, and I hope he does. But it's hard to expect improvements from Cannonier at 38 years old. I mean, he fought Adesanya the worst possible way you can. Cannonier fights best when he just presses forward, when he's the bully, when he's explosive, when he's landing hard power shots. He has those massive legs where they generate so much power. He sits on his punches, and he connects with big power shots, either puts you out or rocks you or bullies you, kind of pressures you back to where he wants to, get you on your back foot. He has thudding leg kicks when he throws. He doesn't throw enough, but when he does, they're not slapping. They're just a thudding sound.
Yeah.
But the issue about Cannonier, and not even the Izzy fights, but a lot of fights, is that he can be gun shy when he's out when, you know, his opponents has more weapons than him. I mean, we saw it a little bit against Rob Whittaker, where he was just outpointed, didn't make any adjustments. And then the worst case, obviously, was the title fight against Israel Adesanya, where he would just get outpointed, didn't make any adjustments, just sat back and just was willing to lose a low output kickboxing match. I'm not sure about his. So he will wrestle a little bit, but that's definitely not his strength. If he gets on top, he's got some mean ground and pound. I mean, like we saw what he did to Jack Hermanson. Yeah, landing big power shots. He's like Derek Brunson type level ground and pound. Because he's, like you mentioned, he's a bricked up middleweight, so he can generate a lot of power. I'm not sure about his defensive wrestling, because he showed good defensive wrestling against Jack Hermanson, but then he struggled against Derek Brunson. And in fairness, Brunson's a much better wrestler than Jack Hermanson. And like Strickland's somewhere in between those two guys. Like he's not as good as Brunson, but he's probably better than Hermanson. Actually, you know, maybe not even know. Like I'd say Hermanson might be a good comparison. Different styles, but some, you know what I mean? Like, close in the range. Now, Strickland, he's a very technically sound striker. He's one of these guys, he starts off slow because it's just setting traps, and then he picks the pace up as the fight moves on when he starts getting in his rhythm. He likes to march down his opponents constantly. He one of the guys, he marches down his opponent, and he constantly takes that ground, which he was trying to do against Alex Bahia. In fairness, like before Bahia knocked him out, he was winning. But it's one of those... It was the worst thing to do to Alex Bahia, because Bahia just basically timed him. Okay, every time I step forward, he takes his ground, takes ground, and then he just timed him stepping forward with a left, a left hook that put him out. I mean, that legendary left hook that Alex Bahia has done so many times now. Cannonier has power. I just don't think he can do that. Now, could he land one big shot? Oh, absolutely, but I mean, like the setup, the thought, the reading a guy. I don't know if he can do that. Now, Strickland has one of the best jabs in MMA. He follows it up with straight punches down the pipe. He keeps everything tight. He doesn't overextend on shots. Not many tells. I'd say he has stinging power. He doesn't have one punch end the fight power. He's more of a cumulative striker where he just keeps landing on you slowly. You don't want to take these little shots as much. Hard kicks to the body. I like the calf kicks. He is open to some calf kicks himself. You mentioned his grappling, his wrestling. He'll grind the clinch. He doesn't mind wrestling. I mean, he took down Uriah Hall 4 times in their fight, and he's got good takedown defense in case Cannonier wants to turn it into a wrestling match. Hopefully, Cannonier comes out like a bull and makes this a brawl. That is his best out of victory. I was talking about Strickland is this guy who jabs into position and taking that ground and slowly moving you back. That's why you can't fight Strickland that way. Go right at him. If he does that, he's got a better shot of winning. But in a kickboxing match, it's going to be Strickland just piecing him up with a jab from the outside. I think that's exactly how it fights. I don't think Strickland's going to wrestle. I think he's going to jab, move, avoid Cannonier's power returns, and just responds with jab, teep kick, calf kick, sidestep. I think we'll have a very the fight with Robert Whittaker against Cannonier, or even the Israel Adesanya fight, where it's very similar. Cannonier just refusing to match volume, just getting picked apart from the outside. I don't think it's going to be the most exciting fight. Give me Strickland by decision.
There you go. 2 picks for Sean Strickland to keep his name high up on that list. Cannonier to take another step back in the division. That's it for the Sherdog Radio Network preview for UFC Vegas 66, UFC Fight Night 216, Strickland versus Cannonier. I've been your host, Ben Duffy. He has been Keith Shillan. If this is your first time watching or listening to one of our previews, first of all, thank you. We hope you enjoyed it. We do our best to deliver as good a blend of actual in-depth analysis and the occasional historical or humorous asides as you'll find anywhere in the business. Please do subscribe, leave us a comment. Keith and I both man the comment section on the YouTube page, and we would love to hear your takes on these fights. Certainly, if you think we're out of our minds about any of these, or you have a crazy upset pick that you want to get on record and get your credit for, please do. But most importantly, join us for the recap. Normally, Keith and I are live on the Sherdog YouTube page about 15 minutes after the main event, where we would break down all these fights, and go back and forth with you in the live chat, taking your questions and your comments. Due to unforeseen circumstances beyond our control, Keith and I are both unavailable this weekend. So unless the Sherdog decides to recruit, Sean Sheehan or one of the other radio people to do the recap, it will be a recapless weekend, and you won't hear from Shillan and Duffy again, possibly until after the first of the year. I do intend to preview the Ryzen versus Bellator New Year's Eve card. Not sure yet whether I'm going to be able to convince Keith to do that one with me, or, I'll have to go to the bullpen. But if this is the last time we talk on camera in 2022, Keith, I wish you and your family a very happy holidays. I know that, it's been a fun year. We've had some good weeks of picks. We've had some lousy weeks of picks. And in both cases, I couldn't think of someone I'd rather enjoy them with. Yeah. So have a Merry Christmas to you. Happy New Year. And
thank you, brother.
Same to all of you watching and listening. Happy holidays to all of you. And we will catch you after the first of the year.
Yeah. And real quick, so this is our last one of the year. So obviously, Merry Christmas to everybody, and happy holidays or whatever they celebrate, and Happy New Year. But Ben, it's been a great year, man. We've been doing this for a while now, and there's nobody else I'd rather do this with. I think you're the very best in the business, and I think we're a pretty good team. So I don't say this enough, but yeah, I really like doing the show with you, and you're the man. So until next year, until I say something nice about you again.
I appreciate that. Yeah, got to get my one per year.
Yeah.
All right.